Good morning, everybody. Let me go ahead and call this meeting to order. Welcome to an informational hearing of the Senate Energy, Utilities, and Communications Committee. I want to thank Senators Corbett, Senators Cox, and Senators Dutton for being here. We have other members that are on the way. But for purposes of framing today's discussion, as many of you know, the pro tem of the Senate has asked every policy committee to hold a series of hearings this year focusing on accountability and oversight of state departments and agencies, of existing programs, of recent legislation from the last few years to see what's working and what may not be working. This committee, many of you participated, held a hearing just a few weeks ago that looked at broadband in general, broadband deployment, adoption, investment, and workforce issues, and also DIVCA specifically, given the legislation that was passed and signed into law in 2006. So today's hearing is actually the next in that series. Today's hearing is focusing on energy efficiency, the policies and programs, and whether or not we're making progress, how we quantify that success. That'll be the subject of the first half of today's hearing. We'll hear from the PUC and others involved with implementation of those programs. The second part of the hearing will also focus on energy efficiency, but specifically how the Energy Commission is doing in receiving and awarding the Recovery Act dollars that are meant to put people back to work and to retain jobs throughout the state of California. With respect to energy efficiency, many folks are aware that the average Californian uses about 40% less electricity than the average American. In fact, it's truly scary to think where the California economy might be today if it wasn't for California's energy efficiency standards and track record. A recent study from the economics department at UC Berkeley shows us that California's energy efficiency policies have saved the state $56 billion in electricity costs while creating 1.5 million jobs over the last 35 years. Energy efficiency is not just good for the environment, it's also good for the economy. And the goals couldn't be clearer for the state of California, prioritizing energy efficiency over renewables and conventional energy production in our loading order to meet not just our energy needs, but reduce our greenhouse gas footprint in the process. So as an engineer, I get it. We can not only save energy, we can save ratepayer money and create jobs if we continue to do things correctly or improve upon how we do things around here. Many states focus their energy policy strictly on the reliability of their energy supply and how to pay for it. And while that's important, I don't believe an energy policy is as successful as it can be without first maximizing the benefit of existing supply. And that means maximizing energy efficiency. And before we get started with the first panel, I need to acknowledge Art Rosenfeld, who, as we all know, is sort of the father of energy efficiency here in the state of California. We wouldn't be here discussing these programs, discussing the successes and striving to do better if it wasn't for the work that he has done for us. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin with the first part of the hearing and call forward the first the first speaker, Commissioner Diane Grueneich from the California Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you, Senator Padilla and other members of the committee. I'm very pleased to be here this morning and am happy to both give my short presentation at the beginning. Let's try that again. Okay. Okay. And I'm sorry to wake everybody up in that particular way. I'll just run through my short presentation. I believe that you have copies of that. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as you hear from any of the other witnesses this morning, if there are any additional questions you'd like to ask me during the hearing, I am planning on staying for the entire hearing this morning. I really am going to give an overview of energy efficiency in California. I've been involved in this area for 3 decades. I had the honor of actually working on the very first round of building standards at the Energy Commission about 30 years ago. And I want to say that we can take pride in the program that we have developed over the years. And there are challenges. I'm not going to say there aren't challenges, because we are running the world's largest program in this area. And along the way, we are developing new, innovative approaches. Not everything succeeds, but overall, it is a history of very fundamental success that has resulted in significant savings, development of jobs, and avoiding some of the impacts from new generation supplies. So the first chart, which we're actually starting to call the Art Rosenfeld curve number 2, the curve that many of us know is the fact that we've been able to keep per capita usage of energy constant in California. But this is really the story looking forward where we think we can go, which is pretty significant. If you look at the first chart up above, the black line, that is where we're going to go from the Energy Commission demand forecast, assuming the savings from the programs that we have already undertaken, which many of the savings last over time, so you can look at their savings that continue. But what's very interesting is the red line, and these are the goals that our commission has adopted looking forward, that in order to provide some stability in the area of energy efficiency, we adopt annual goals for the utilities and cumulative goals looking out about a decade so that everybody can understand what it means in terms of thinking ahead. And what we're looking at now in California is very remarkable, which is that we are going to be able to, we think, keep the overall energy usage in the state constant, even though we know that our population is going to grow, we know that we're going to have additional devices, this sort of thing. But this is a very, very important development for the state, because what it means is that as we are able to develop additional renewable resources, we're actually going to be having our carbon usage drop down, despite, as I said, the fact that, again, we're looking at increased population growth and probably increased usages of more appliances. And this is something that we haven't seen in the past, but again, it's looking at being able to do a much better job of how we're approaching energy efficiency and taking into account that we're having a whole host of savings that have built up over the last decade or so. So let me move on. I think you were provided with copies of the California Long-Term Energy Efficiency Strategic Plan. What that is we recognized about 3 years ago now that we were spending, quite frankly, an awful lot of ratepayer money, people that are individual, money from individuals and from businesses and industry in California that is paid through in their electric and natural gas bills. And we decided that we needed to have something in writing that was very clear where are we going with these massive energy efficiency programs. So we spent about a year bringing in experts, bringing in all of the state agencies, bringing in the local agencies, and working with the utilities, and out of this have developed what is now the plan that we are following for the energy efficiency programs in California. And if you look at the next page on the handout, that's just the table of contents in the plan. And what it does is it covers what we call the end-use sectors, which is residential, industrial, commercial, agricultural. And then it also has the cross-cutting areas, codes and standards, the workforce training, marketing and outreach, local governments. And in each of these areas in the plan, we have set very specific goals of what we are seeking to achieve out through 2020 and beyond. And then we've broken it out, the strategies for each of those goals. And then within each of the strategies, who are the players that need to be involved beyond just our agency and beyond just the utilities to make it successful. And then we've broken down each of those strategies into a time period that matches the funding period that we use at the PUC. So we tried to be very concrete and very specific. And I think this, Senator Padilla, goes back to the comment you made at the beginning, which is looking into what is the oversight. And frankly, we've changed our approach a bit in the last few years to say, as a government agency that is charged with ensuring that ratepayer money is spent in the best interests of those who are paying for it, the ratepayers, we need to really understand and give direction and have oversight into how this money is being spent. And so this is meant to be a very public, transparent approach where everybody can see how we are looking at where these programs are going. So then let me turn to the dollars part of it, and that again is your next slide, is after we had adopted the plan, we then faced what would be the next round of funding cycle for the investor-owned utility programs in California. We fund on a 3-year cycle basis, so you'll see at the top it's 2010 through 2012. And what we did for this pot of money was that, again, we spent about a year in a very public approach, getting lots of comments from folks, and we matched the funding of the programs to be consistent with the strategic plan. And so, for example, what we ended up doing was in each of these areas showing how the programs themselves are going to meet the goals. So let me just quickly go through the numbers. They are, for this cycle, it's about $3.8 billion in funding. $3.13 billion is for general energy efficiency. $750 million is for the low-income areas. And I want to take a moment to talk about that. We adopted in the strategic plan 4 areas that we call the big, bold energy efficiency strategies, because we wanted to really set some challenge goals for ourselves. And one of them is in the low-income area. And the specific goal that we have at the Commission now is that by 2020, every low-income resident who participates in the investor-owned utility energy efficiency programs that is eligible and wants to take advantage of the low-income programs will be covered. In other words, by 2020, anybody who qualifies for our low-income energy efficiency programs and wants to take advantage of them, we will ensure they will be covered. These programs are offered at no cost to those who participate. And what we then did was we took that goal of 2020 and we broke it down into basically the funding periods between now and 2020. We increased the funding period, the funding amount, and I want to say that we are on target now for achieving that goal. In this year alone, our investor-owned utilities, working with the community-based organizations, are going to weatherize over 200,000 low-income homes in California. I personally went out to this year alone, 200,000. 2010, yes.
Sure, I understand. 200,000 in 2010.
Yes.
And you currently have done 183.
I'm not sure where no, we've done many more.
I don't think anybody agrees with that, but okay.
The there is a separate program in low income which is funded under the federal government, and federal stimulus money comes in, and that comes into a different agency from the Public Utilities Commission. I'm not counting that. We do coordinate with them, and I know there have been some issues about the implementation of that program, but all the information we have is for the investor-owned utility low-income program. It is proceeding very successfully, and we're on target for meeting the goals. Looking at the savings potentials, I won't go into a lot of the numbers, but we're basically avoiding needing to build one large power plant a year through these energy efficiency programs. But let me now take you to the next page, which is the job picture. We're fairly conservative, frankly, in the estimate of the new jobs, and there may be higher estimates, but looking at for this portfolio of programs that I just talked about over the next 3 years, we're estimating about 15,000 to 20,000 new jobs. We specifically have put in workforce training programs of over 100 million, about 122 million, and then there is, out of that money that I talked about on the prior page, there's 260 million that is allocated directly to local government programs as well. So that's really sort of the job side of it. Let me just take you through some of the program highlights. One of the changes that we made this time around, as I said, was that we we basically have the programs now lined up with the strategic plan. I personally think that one of the problems before had been that the utilities had about 200 different programs that were being offered on energy efficiency, and the information that I got was that that was very confusing. So we now have 12 statewide program. We're extremely pleased that we will be launching next month the largest home retrofit program in the country. We also are launching, we've taken a look at our marketing to really bring that much more up to date with what we think is going to be effective. We're launching a web portal using the internet to have the technical information about these programs much more available and accessible throughout the state. And then we're doing a bottoms-up complete review of the measurement and verification of energy efficiency. So I'll just close with a few minutes on that. Unless you know what you're achieving with energy efficiency, you're really not able to measure what's going on. And we are using the approaches to measurement and verification for energy efficiency that basically have been developed over the last 30 years. And for 2006 through 2008 programs, we did very complicated, very sophisticated measurement programs that looked at about 90% of all savings, which is an enormous undertaking when you think that the amount of money that was spent was over $2.5 billion. So this was a huge effort that did succeed in looking at about 90% of the savings. And we got some very important results. One was that the traditional way that energy efficiency has been done in the last couple of years, which is these compact fluorescent light bulbs, which have the advantage, they're cheap programs to run and they're easy programs to run in the scheme of things. We found that the good news was that there is high saturation of many of the CFL markets. So one of the big changes that we've made in the programs in California as a result of the measurement and verification was in this program cycle, we have moved away from a lot of the CFL programs, and that's why we're launching this home retrofit program as an example. We've also adjusted, without going into technical details, sort of the savings ways that we're accounting for the measures, again, based upon what we've learned in the past. And then the last thing that we're doing that will be, I'm hopeful, a decision by the end of this year at our commission, is to really think forward what should be the way that we're approaching EM&V for the next funding cycle, which will start in 2013. Because I personally hope that as we are having more and more energy efficiency programs, more and more people involved in this area, that we can develop ways that are of measuring that take into account the different programs and the different players, and that quite frankly may not be so expensive to run as we now have. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, but that's really the overview. We've tried to have a written roadmap, tried to be clear where we're going with these programs. We've tried to make it transparent and take into account as much input as we can.
Okay.
Thank you.
A couple questions, and I'll invite members of the committee to ask as well. On page 7, you pointed out the statewide education campaign to create behavior change. Is there a dollar figure associated with that campaign, to that effort?
I am sure there is, and I can either turn around or perhaps when Jean comes up, or we'll get you that figure during the hearing this morning.
But here's my big question of the morning. And this will be a recurring theme in future panels, so everybody take note. I appreciate the note that you ended on, which is, measuring effectiveness, the evaluation, measurement, and verification tools. So on page 5, you talk about the 3-year program, the $3.13 billion for general energy efficiency programs, $750 million for low-income homes and appliances. How do you break down sort of the cost-benefit analysis of those efforts? You show us the savings potential from an energy standpoint, a CO2 standpoint. Are there numbers attached to those programs on cost-benefit, and how do they measure up against renewable projects?
They actually measure up very well against renewable projects, but let me just do a real quick overview. By state law, the investor-owned utility programs must be cost-effective. And what that means is that when you take what we call the entire portfolio of programs, that within the $313 billion, there are, as I said, 12 major statewide programs, and then there are a host of local government programs and other specialized programs. And we can break those down, and we have by the ones for each of the individual investor-owned utilities. And so each utility knows what is its budget that it's been authorized to spend over that 3-year period. And let me just take as a hypothetical, I'm just making it up, a utility has $1 billion budget over 2010 through 2012. What we have done is we have calculated that the programs of spending that $1 billion is at least equivalent to, and hopefully saves more money than if you took that $1 billion and used it to build power plants. So by having a statutory requirement that some of these programs must be cost effective, ratepayers are always at least no worse than if we took that same amount of money and built power plants. Now, the way that we measure the power plant cost is the average cost of power. And at least right now, renewables are more expensive than our average cost of fossil power plants. And so we are in a situation where it is cheaper to be doing energy efficiency than building renewables.
And don't misinterpret my question, or at least the purpose of the question. Not suggesting that we should not do renewables, but I also don't believe that we should pour 90% of our attention towards renewables at the expense of proven success in energy efficiency programs, proven cost effectiveness in energy efficiency programs. That was my larger point.
You and I see eye to eye on that, I would say.
Okay. Members of the committee, any questions or comments from Ms. Grunig? Senator Dutton.
Yeah, just a couple. When you did your, obviously you had somebody do some kind of economic impact analysis or something. Did the commission do it themselves, or did they have one of our universities do it, or?
We do it in-house, and then we have consultants, I'm certain, who also assist our staff. I don't believe we actually use the universities for the analyses.
Has there ever been any peer review done on your work? As far as the analysis go, we've had some problems in some other agencies with regards to their findings. So I'm just curious if you actually went out and had any peer review done on your.
The type of peer review that we have is that we have an open process and a docket, and in energy efficiency, because it's of such interest and frankly there's a lot of money there, we typically have dozens of parties that come in and present their comments, their analysis of the way it actually works is the utilities start off by submitting their proposals and their analysis. Then we have, as I said, an open process where literally dozens of parties come in and give their competing views, and then our staff goes through and sifts through all of this and presents their independent analysis of what's done. It's all public, it's all transparent, so that if there are disagreements, hopefully we're hearing about them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just kind of curious on when you made your determinations about future projections and so forth, that analysis was just done in the last year or so. Is that what happened? And I'm kind of interested in your findings, what the CUP's predictions are with regards to when we're coming out of the recession and we're going to see drops, because obviously your findings have to be based on a certain amount of growth assumptions, jobs, the types of jobs, and other things, and I don't see any, and it could be because I just got this. Is there something in here that'll let me know what the assumptions were that were made by your staff when they came to these conclusions?
There's nothing here in this power plant, but I would be absolutely happy to get that information to you.
I'm just curious because I can, any of us can make anything, say anything we want. And so I really kind of would like to know what the assumptions were for some of the determinations that they made. Also, did the Ratepayers Advocate Office actually, did they do a review on this? Or, because I don't know if they're going to comment on it later.
They participate very actively in the case, and I will say that a lot of the changes that we've made in the energy efficiency programs have been in response to comments from the Division of Ratepayer Advocates. When the utilities get up here, they may be so polite that they may not want to in front of me tell you, but we didn't accept many of their proposals and made some pretty major shifts this time around.
Yeah. With regards to your projections here, one of my concerns about renewable energy is that California likes to operate on a different standard or definition as to what is a renewable. And obviously the legislature has done a lot in doing that, but there are certain sources of renewable energy right now that our utility companies are not permitted to contract with, although they are extremely clean and very affordable. With part of the recommendation and thinking about the future, because we're trying to hit its efficiencies, but also we need to keep our costs down as much as possible to be competitive. My wife constantly reminds me that we're using less power, but it's costing us more. Well, part of that's because we don't allow people to actually go out and contract with, even though it's very clean environmental power, we don't allow them to do that because we're trying to apparently force people into going into different directions. Do you think, along with this long-range plan, that maybe we should look at revising our policy with regards to what we identify as a renewable source?
I'm going to take the opportunity to say I'm really talking about energy efficiency, and I look to our direction from the legislature on how renewable power is defined for purposes of our RPS.
CUP you don't really have any you don't really care about that one way or another, and certainly when you're doing this report here, you're not making any recommendations as to what we should be building in the future, or allowing our power companies to be able to contract for different types of power sources. You don't have any recommendations in that area?
I didn't show up here today prepared to give a recommendation, but in all seriousness, at the PUC, I take it seriously that as we are implementing the renewable portfolio standard, we're going to follow what is the law on how our renewables are defined.
I understand that, but you've given me a long-term energy efficiency strategic plan. Now, it would seem to me a strategic plan for energy efficiency is it would also deal with sources of the power. It doesn't do that anymore?
No, it's looking at, regardless of what the source of the power is, how can we actually save on the usage of the power? And that was the purview within which would operate.
So you don't really do any kind of an economic analysis in here then anyway?
This didn't attempt to do a review of what could be the sources of renewable power, what could be the changes in it, or the specific economics of different programs. This really was
just how to use less power, not necessarily how much it costs or anything?
correct.
But how then, I thought you said you did an economic analysis.
We do when we do the program approval. In other words, this is a plan, a roadmap of where we can go forward. But any specific programs that are funded, any use of ratepayer dollar is subject to a cost-effective economic analysis.
But we don't want to take a look at the source of the power and the cost of the power when we're trying to do, I guess I'm being confused. I don't mean to be difficult, but I don't understand how you can get to where you're talking about if you also don't take a look at where the sources of power are and how much that's going to cost.
I think at the PUC, overall, they do look at both. But this specific program, the energy efficiency program, as I tried to distinguish in my opening remarks, is while every state pays proper attention to energy supply versus demand, reliability issues, we're not going to have an ideal policy in place until we maximize our existing supply. And part of maximizing the benefit from existing supply is energy efficiency. It's basically trying to squeeze the last drop out of every electron, if you will. So,
well, I guess I misunderstood.
That's
I
correct.
thought you were talking about a benefit analysis, and I thought that was maybe I just assumed that had to do with cost and business and stuff.
But to the extent that energy efficiency programs help us save energy, if you will, or be more efficient with our energy, there is in lieu of additional generation, computation, if you will.
Yes, and there are forecasts done of looking out over time. What you basically are starting off, what is the current supply, which does look at costs and does look at where the power is coming from. So Senator Dutton, you are absolutely correct. It wasn't done in the context of the plan. It was done in the context of the approval we gave in September 2009 for this $3 billion funding. And so it did look very concretely at what were the costs of the utilities' existing sources of power, what was forecast as their future supplies of power, their future costs of obtaining that power, and then offset it against, if you did the energy efficiency instead, would you save money? And the conclusion was you would.
Okay, well, I'm more confused now than I was before because I actually thought that's what I was just talking about, and then you're telling me we aren't, and we don't do this. I can tell you as somebody who's actually taken a look at when I go out and acquire a piece of property, and I did this professionally for 40 years, and one of the things I do is energy consumption analysis, and we take a look at doing different types of capital improvements to increase our efficiency and reduce our cost. But what you're telling me is going to happen. I'm going to have to redo these efficiencies, but it's not going to reduce my cost. It's just going to save me from having even higher cost. So it's not. I just have a real problem with this kind of a strategic plan when it's not tied into any kind of you're making assumptions. And I can't get there with this, so I guess I'm just confused.
And I don't know if this is helping or making it worse. I interpret it a little bit differently. It's not that doing those upgrades to a building like as you're discussing wouldn't help. It indeed would help. It may not change the rate, for example, but when consumption goes down because the building is more efficient, then the dollar amount of your bill is going to go down as a result. And I think that's what we've seen en masse. People, on the one hand, say, well, energy or electricity is more expensive in California given our various programs and initiatives, but due to energy efficiency, the usage is down. And so it sort of offsets the bill at the end of the day.
That's correct. And let me offer to meet with you separately, Senator, because the last thing I want to do is obviously to have left you more confused after I've talked than when you started.
Okay, well, just keep in mind I'm interested in the long-term benefits, but I'm also concerned about the short-term problems and challenges.
And I think Senator Dutton's point of view on this, from not his comments here, his comments here today, but in our private conversations, he's actually one of the good guys. He's approaching with the good intentions and what arguably is the sweet spot for this in all programs. Once it pencils, once it makes economic sense, it's going to take off, and we'll get both the economic benefit and the environmental benefit of it as a result. Senator Cox has some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I suppose, Madam Commissioner, I'm on the other side of the good guy portion. But I did spend 4 years on the SMUD board, where we spent a significant amount of time talking about conservation and the fact that a conserved watt was worth more than another kind of watt. But I thank you for coming this morning. Let me just ask you a couple of questions. One of which is, can you, as a member, tell me as a member where I can verify the information that you have provided this morning in terms of not your goals and objectives, but the actual results? Can you tell me where that's being kept? Is it on a website? Is it a report that's provided by the PUC on a monthly or quarterly basis? I'd just like to be able to look at the numbers myself and perhaps come to the same conclusion or a different conclusion.
I'll be happy to follow up and give you in writing the specific sources that you can look at. I do know that our staff is in the process of basically, for the last program cycle, which was 2006 through 2008, preparing a summary report of all the studies that have been done to verify the savings, and that will be released, I believe, about the middle of next month. But in the interim, we've also had, I believe they are annual reports that have been prepared. So I'll get you the information provided.
Please. I'd also be interested to know where I can track the progress of the 200,000 projects that you were forecasting from 2010 to 2012. To me, that means, by the way, that you got to do 67,000 projects per year, I believe, if it's 200,000 over a 3-year period of time. Is that what you've said?
It's 200,000 a year, so 600,000 over a 3-year period.
So it's not 200,000 over 3 years, so it's 200,000 a year.
200,000 a year, yes. And again, I'll be happy to give that information to you.
Very much interested in that. And then, as I did mention to you about the aspect of serving on the SMUD board, and I was interested to learn that there was another father of conservation, because I always thought it was Dave Freeman.
He's another wonderful person in this area.
At least that's what Dave said.
Well, now that he's head of, or I don't know what he is, at LADWP, we look for their leadership in energy efficiency.
I don't think he's here this morning, or I would ask him again. But do you have any way of knowing whether or not there are any high-tech firms in California that have not, in fact, built out in California, because high-tech firms have a need for firm resources of power. Sometimes they don't care what the cost is so much as they care whether the power is there and whether it's clean or not. Does the PUC make any effort to track the firms that have built elsewhere? For example, Intel had $5 or $6 billion. They announced earlier this year. It's a California company, but not a single dime of that money stayed in California. It all went to the states around California. So does the PUC keep any kind of records about business that we might have had if we were not just talking about conserving energy, but we were talking about providing a firm, clean source of power?
I don't know that we track it. I do know that we offer for those businesses that can document that they basically may leave the state. And I think that it comes in terms of, I haven't looked at this in a couple of years, but it's a tariff that our utilities can then offer to the companies to entice them to stay, or I believe it may include ad operations. And I know that one component is specifically helping them on energy efficiency. It may also include some discount rates. I'd be happy to follow up and get you the information on that.
Can you also just make a calculated guess this morning as to how much a board of the PUC, or individual members for that matter, spend on trying to determine whether or not the rules and regulations that have been passed and you're enforcing, does your board or board members give any consideration to whether or not it enhances the economy of the state of California, or is that beyond your jurisdiction?
I don't know that we specifically look at in every decision, is it helping or hurting the economy? It's certainly, frankly, something that I keep in mind when, as a commissioner, I'm asked to make decisions on proposed rate increases. I actually did dissent from a major rate increase decision at the end of last year, and I cited my concerns about the economic impact. So I can't speak to my fellow commissioners, but I can assure you this is something that I personally take quite seriously, that our decisions impact greatly the ability of many of our businesses to stay in California. I mean, energy is a significant cost of doing business for many of them, and I take that seriously.
Does the PUC have any kind of program in place that where you jump up and down during a board meeting and say, we need to let the legislature know that's the dumbest damn thing you've ever seen?
I'm not sure I've ever seen that.
That'll be a constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Senator Dutton.
At the same time, you're doing fact-finding. Could you look into why Apple decided to build their data center in North Carolina? I heard it was energy costs, and then also Facebook, I guess, also took and built a server or something up in Oregon. And both of those are, California-based companies. I'm just curious why they didn't stay here.
Okay.
So,
I'll see what I can find out.
thank you.
Other questions from the committee or comments? Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your report. Look forward to that additional information that's been requested by members of the committee. Now call forward, also from the Public Utilities Commission, Gene Clinton, a manager of climate strategies, for a presentation on sort of lessons learned from our energy efficiency efforts before the Looking Forward panel. And along with her, Gene Rodriguez from Southern California Edison, Laura Ensign from the Natural Resources Defense Council, and Mark Toney from the Utility Reform Network. And if I can ask you each to each to keep to as close to 5 minutes as possible, we'd really appreciate it.
Go ahead and get started.
Hold on, push the button. There you go.
I thought red meant off. Okay. There was a question to Commissioner Grinick about how much money was being spent on the statewide marketing, education, and outreach campaign. So for the next 3 years, the total budget is $80 million, so that would be in the neighborhood of $77 million. I'm sorry, $25 million a year.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I didn't. Could you just repeat that?
Sure. The budget for the statewide marketing, education, and outreach for the next 3 years through the investor-owned utilities is $80 million. So about $25 or $26 million per year.
And what does the outreach include?
It's a combination of a statewide messaging broadly to consumers about specific energy efficiency actions that they're being encouraged to take, the benefits of doing so,
Is the Flex Your Power campaign part of it, or an example of it?
Flex Your Power is an example of what we've been doing in the past, and the effort going forward is to broaden and strengthen the brand and the approach to consumers to not just build awareness, but also to engage in concrete, comprehensive action.
Okay, let's let them proceed with their presentations and come back with questions after all four have presented.
Yep. So you have a prepared handout by me, and given the 5-minute challenge, I might focus on just a few of the slides for your benefit. I'd like to focus on page 3, which gives you an overview of how the CPUC sets direction for the energy efficiency activities of the utilities and measures outcomes. That color-coordinated handout shows you several bubbles. The green bubbles are the CPUC action, the yellow bubbles are the utility actions, and you'll see that there's a high degree of iteration and exchange. So that starts with the PUC setting the goals and the policy direction, the utilities, as Commissioner Grunick indicated, then proposing a portfolio of activities. The CPUC reviews and authorizes that with modifications, as we heard. The utilities then go into the program design and implementation. Then the CPUC manages the independent evaluation, measurement, and verification of what was accomplished. The results of that feeds back both to how utilities are designed and implemented in the future, the policy direction that comes forward from the Commission, and also becomes data that is used in the shareholder incentive mechanism. So that is a simplistic version of explaining what goes on. There are many, many moving parts. But I think that gives you a good picture of sort of the checks and balances in the system. Page 4 goes into a little bit more detail on the evaluation, measurement, and verification aspects of the CPUC's oversight. This happens in 3 parts. First is evaluating what the impacts of the programs are, primarily in terms of installed energy efficiency measures and their savings. The second dimension is the cost-effectiveness analysis in terms of what's the economic value to ratepayers, to consumers, and from a resource perspective of these impacts. And thirdly, the feedback loop of applying the lessons learned into future program design and implementation. Page 5 gives you a more granular sense of what goes into this evaluation process. As we heard, there were 250 programs. They contain about 1,000 different technical measures in 9,000 variations across 4 utilities, 2 of which are combined gas and electric companies, 1 in electric only and 1 in gas only. So this creates some challenge in doing all the evaluation. The evaluation effort has taken 4 years. It's involved 23 contracts, more than 50,000 customer surveys, more than 12,000 site visits, a substantial evaluation budget, more than 60 public meetings, and 1,700 public comments. So in terms of vigilance, review, and transparency, I think this is on a scale that no one typically experiences. Moving ahead to how we have applied some key lessons learned on page 6. What's come out of this is an emphasis on statewide approaches rather than individual utility approaches, where we're looking for uniform program designs and messaging, and also leveraging of entrepreneurs. And by that I mean the big box retailers, the builders, the major commercial property owners, getting them engaged. We're also spending more time trying to understand the behavioral aspects and motivational aspects of energy efficiency by commissioning targeted research that gives us a better sense of how standard social marketing and market research practices can be applied in this field, such as understanding demographic, social, political values, and how that may influence a propensity to undertake energy efficiency. Another direction that has come out of the evaluation process is to put more emphasis on comprehensive one-stop or whole house approaches to energy efficiency. So whole house retrofit is a major new program in the portfolio, so that we're not just targeting what to do with light bulbs or what to do with refrigerators or what to do about attic insulation or how to replace your air conditioner, but we're trying to pull that together in a comprehensive package. I might add that that kind of a comprehensive approach also lends itself well to taking advantage of the PACE municipal financing that we're starting to see across the state. And finally, we also have a strong emphasis on end-to-end strategic planning, so that we start with the Energy Commission's work in public interest energy research on new technologies. We move that into programs that push emerging technologies. We have the utilities offer the financial and technical incentive programs. We coordinate with the Energy Commission and local governments who are taking their own initiatives. And then we bring as much of that into what we are seeking ultimately, which is permanent market transformation. Whether we do that through permanently changing the way builders build or the way retailers stock their appliances, or whether we do that through the Energy Commission's authority with minimum codes and standards. So it's viewed as a continuum, with the utility programs sort of being in the middle of that continuum. Page 8 gives you an overview of where we're going on the next 3 years with spending on the $3.1 billion main portfolio. This is separate from the low-income programs. This will give you a sense that, residential and commercial programs are clearly the biggest activities, followed by industrial sector. On my last slide, I might point to some policy issues ahead. First, the PUC is working very closely with the Energy Commission on its demand forecast, with the Air Resources Board on the greenhouse gas scoping plan implementation, which calls for about 15% of the greenhouse gas reductions to come from energy efficiency programs, and for our own periodic updating of goals and targets for the utilities. I might bring to your attention that the public goods charge funding is set to expire in January 1st, 2012, so that will be an important time where we'll be looking for renewal of that authority before that time. And finally, as we look at brokering these statewide approaches and integrating with the Energy Commission's efforts, the Air Resources Board, the local government financing, there's a challenge for how we provide the leadership and engagement of statewide approaches. That's one of the reasons that the Public Utilities Commission sponsored the statewide strategic plan, to try to articulate a roadmap for how we all work on this together. So I would just finish by saying we have choices that we'll all have to make as we look forward to tapping and maximizing efficiency, in terms of how much we look to for voluntary approaches versus approaches that might get more energy savings faster. I know AB 758, which was enacted last year, directed the Energy Commission to come up with a plan or a program for maximizing the retrofit of existing housing and commercial buildings, and the PUC is tasked with looking at whether there's an appropriate role for expanded utility financing to help support that. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We'll have questions for you, but we'll zip through the other presentations first.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senators, for inviting us to come speak today. I'm coming to you today, you'll see from the deck that's being passed out as we speak, as Gene Rodriguez, the Director of Energy Efficiency from Southern California Edison, although I'm really here with 3 different perspectives to share. First is, as a member of Southern California Edison, a company that has a 125-year history being an integral part of the Southern California economy, I am also part of our company's Resource Planning Committee, where we look at the long-term impacts of how we can cheapest and most reliably serve our consumers in Southern California and help the economy to grow there. Secondly, I'm here as a representative of the 3 investor-owned utilities who collaborate together under the watchful guidance of the PUC to make California one of the leaders, not strike that, the leader in this country and perhaps in the world in energy efficiency. And lastly, I'm here with the unique position of the chairman of the board of the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, which is the organization of all major EE program administration entities within all of North America, including Canada. From there, I have a unique perspective, which I'd like to share with you, and I'll start with that on page 2 of the deck that's being handed out. I'm certain you've had many people come here before and tell you that California leads the nation, if not the world, in energy efficiency. Well, I am here to tell you that from my perspective as the chairman of the board of every major energy efficiency organization in North America, Canada included, that is the fact. And the facts are borne out on page 2 here, because although you will hear a little bit later today about some controversies about how we go about with the assumptions and the accounting around energy efficiency, the uncontroverted fact is the investor-owned utilities in the state of California help our consumers in California, businesses and residences alike in all economic strata, to install and benefit from more energy-efficient hardware than any other state in the country. In fact, if you add up the efforts of most of the other states in the country, we, just the 3 IOUs of California, are doing more to install energy efficiency that is actually verified. People are able to check and make sure this stuff is in place and operating and creating benefits than 44 other states of the United States combined. This is tremendous leadership, and it could not happen without wise policy guidance from this legislature and from the governor's office, without appropriate oversight from the PUC. But I'm going to get us to our next point, without, quite frankly, the cool, calm, and calculated economics of energy efficiency. We do energy efficiency in California's investor-owned utilities, with which we have a fiduciary obligation to our shareholders and a moral obligation to our consumers to make sure that these programs work. We do it because it makes sense. So as you go to page 3, what you see is the thing that we do in our long-term resource planning process, where we look not just at what the projections are for the future, but the impacts from programs in the past. We have been running these programs since the 70s. When we look at those impacts, we see a very real decline in the demand we have to serve. And just as importantly, these demand-side management programs allow us to reshape, to bend down the peakiness of California's air conditioner-driven load factor, which allows us to provide more reliable service and do it cheaper. Beyond that, I take you to the question of the day, which was raised a bit earlier with CPUC Commissioner Gruenig, is energy efficiency. Do we have the metrics? Do we have the math that proves that energy efficiency is cheaper than supply-side options? The answer is absolutely. We are not doing this in the utilities as an investment that we're making on a whim or a promise. We can show that we are able to collect, we are able to reap, we are able to partner with California's consumers to create energy efficiency savings at about 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, where other options, including conventional resources, no matter how cheap, are always more expensive than energy efficiency. So to your point, Chairman Padilla, it is absolutely the case. If we're going to maximize the utility of resources in the state of California, we must not leave energy efficiency off the table. We must not constrain how we pursue energy efficiency. We must continue to use energy efficiency as an important part of an overall energy portfolio that includes supply-side resources, that includes everything and anything that we can bring to California that will save energy cheaply, that will generate energy cheaply, and do so in an environmentally responsible manner. So let me move on to page 5 and take you to another point. Here is another just absolute bold fact staring us in the face. The good news about energy efficiency is a way of working with California's residents and consumers and businesses in the cities, in the towns, in the neighborhoods in which they work and live. That means that we are creating jobs when we implement energy efficiency, because energy efficiency just doesn't hop off the shelf. It's not something that we do to people, it's something we do with people. The good news around energy efficiency that is not often recorded and not often reported is that with energy efficiency we are able not just to help the California economy by creating new jobs, as Commissioner Gruenig pointed out, but over the history of time that California has been investing in energy efficiency, We have created a stable and sustainable, and I'm going to come back to that word again, a sustainable set of jobs in the California economy with people who either create programs, sell widgets, and or install them in people's homes and businesses. These partnerships, as you'll see from slide 5, go from everywhere from community and faith-based organizations who work in the lowest income communities to our UC systems that turn out the leaders of tomorrow. And then, as you already know, and I think something that California needs to be very, very proud of, we believe and we know that energy efficiency can and must be the cornerstone of any environmental policy this state takes up to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Why? Two simple facts. It is the cheapest, again I come back to that, the cheapest way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to partner with California's consumers to reduce the amount of energy use. And number two, I would argue that is certainly one of the surest ways. Because when you look at bringing power into the state of California, you're talking about building siting power plants, you're talking about transmission, you're talking about a lot of long-term intangibles that come at cost and come at, quite frankly, some degree of uncertainty into the future. So as we look at California's energy future and we look at all the resources available to us, energy efficiency is part of the economic story. It's certainly part of the energy story. We proved that time and time again. And as we move into a more carbon-constrained future, it must be a key part of our environmental approach. So I've spent the first 3.5 minutes of my 5 minutes telling you what's going right, that you didn't ask me just to come here to celebrate our successes. There are things that we could do better in California. And I will tell you again, flat out, as the chairman of the board of the Consortium for Energy Efficiency, every single state, every other program administrator, whether they be utility or non-utility administrator alike, looks to California for our leadership that we're doing here. But there are some things that we are working on in the state of California. One, I would point out to you, because I know it's going to be an issue of controversy among the next two panelists. You hear, and you've heard from me, we know, incontrovertible fact, that more energy efficiency hardware has been installed in California than anywhere else. So what is this controversy that you hear about whether or not the savings are real? It comes around the engineering assumptions, the measurement and verification techniques, et cetera, that rely on sampling, that rely on modeling, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So while we all know that an Energy Star certified compact fluorescent bulb, if it's installed and turned on, we know it's going to use about 1/3 to 1/4 of the energy of a standard bulb. We argue in California about how much credit the utilities should get. One of the things that I think is a part of the issue that we are currently working on in the state of California is that you look at that same Energy Star light bulb, that same compact fluorescent bulb, screwed in the state of California, the utilities currently get and take credit for about 50 to 60% of the savings. If you were to go to the state of New York, they would get 500% of the savings that we're getting here. If you go to the state of Vermont, you get 120%. If you go to Massachusetts, 200%. Does that mean we don't know how much energy it saves? No. It means that when you have something that is much science, as much art, as trying to figure out the assumptions around behavior, around this, around that, there is room for controversy. What we need to do in the state of California, and what the PUC is leading the investor-owned utilities in, and I think they should take credit for that, is to try to bring together people on a going-forward basis and not be so arrogant as to think that we have invented everything perfectly the first time around. The PUC is looking at what is the better way to do measurement and verification to both reduce costs and still maintain the requisite degree of certainty that I, as part of our Utility Resource Planning Commission, require. I know the efficiency saves. I know that it's absurd to have us undervalue greatly the amount of savings from energy efficiency, but even with this controversy, it is still our cheapest and cleanest resource. So my final point for you is, if you go to page 7, the eye chart that you see there is not intended to convince you that we have too many programs in California, too many approaches, I should say, because we have 12 statewide programs and a limited number of local programs, but to make this key point. We provide in California a comprehensive suite of energy savings opportunities so that every single Californian, whether it be low income, whether it be a small business, a large industrial manufacturer, has the opportunity to reap the benefits of the programs that they help fund. That is the genius of California, and I thank you for your opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Before Ms. Atkinson begins, let me just thank you not just for your presentation, but clearly your enthusiasm.
Thank you very much.
And let me just note that I wish utilities were so enthusiastic from the very beginning of the programs, but finally here.
I have been with Edison for 20 years. I can tell you that Edison has been enthusiastic for that entire period of time.
Just like auto manufacturers and seatbelts, right? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Lara Ettinson. I'm the Director of California Energy Efficiency Policy at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Today I would like to take the time to highlight some of the key findings of a recent NRDC white paper that illustrates exactly how California has restored its energy efficiency leadership over the last decade. In front of you, you have a summary cover letter, a PowerPoint, and a full report, which I can't get through in 5 minutes. So I'm going to just touch on a few items and would be happy to elaborate on more either today or at another time. Overall, this report finds that the smart policies enacted in California over the past decade have led to significant economic and environmental benefits and made California a model for the nation, as you've heard, and as has been seen by recent national assessments on energy efficiency achievements in different states. Some of these key policies include a requirement that utilities must use energy efficiency first before procuring alternative energy sources, a funding source to do so, decoupling revenues from sales, and also incentives to reach even deeper savings, all the while holding them accountable with clear oversight. The following examples are only a few numerous findings that highlights California's successes as a result of this package of policies. First, over the past decade, utility efficiency programs have provided $5 billion in net economic benefits to customers. This is money after accounting for the cost of the programs that is available for customers to use on things other than their energy bill, and thus is reinvested into the economy. California bills are over 20% less than the U.S. average, and not only do customers save money on reduced bills, but by reducing the amount of electricity that utilities need to procure, this brings down the cost of electricity in general. This is a key point that we need to continue our efforts on energy efficiency, in addition to the base load and also the peak, which requires even more, which requires dirtier and more costly energy to procure. Second, as we've talked about before, the energy efficiency policies over the past few decades have led to the creation of 1.5 million jobs. This is not only jobs in the sector, but also jobs that result when savings from the energy efficiency actually radiate into the economy. Third, over the past decade, California increased its energy investments almost fivefold, which accounts for nearly a third of the entire U.S. utility industry's investments in energy efficiency, and comparable numbers to savings as well, as Jean has mentioned. In addition, the electricity that was saved in 2008 alone reached the equivalent of the electricity consumed by the households in San Francisco and San Mateo counties combined. In addition, savings have targeted low-income customers, reaching over 40% of all eligible participants, saving them approximately $400 over the life of the measure. I want to reiterate here as well that even if the utilities are found not to have reached as much savings as they initially reported, the savings are significant. And the net benefits from just these past few program cycles, past few years alone, have reached over $1 billion to the economy. However, as you've heard, we also do need to refine our evaluation protocols or evaluation process so that we can be assured that we're focusing mainly on the things that are important at hand to show that we have indeed saved energy so that the utilities can then reduce the amount of alternative energy they have to procure. Lastly, I also want to touch on the pollution savings from these programs. Accumulated since the mid-1970s, utility programs have provided global warming savings that are equivalent to avoiding emissions approximately of those of 3 million cars. In addition, since 2006, the average demand savings have avoided 1 power plant per year, and this is expected to continue to move forward. So while these policies have enabled energy efficiency savings and really have shown that by integrating energy efficiency into the utility business plan, we still need to refine some of these policies moving forward to ensure that we capture the significant potential that remains, and also to address the increasing need for improving our economy and lowering customer bills. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Tony?
Thank you. My name is Mark Toney. I'm the Executive Director of TURN, the Utility Reform Network. Thank you, Chairman Padilla and Senators, for letting me have this opportunity. As you can see from my presentation, I'm taking a little bit different view, and the view is this, that in fact, the utilities have made a huge contribution to energy efficiency, but the question is, at what price? If you give any institution enough money, they will be able to produce a program. Our argument is that it is far too expensive for far too little in return, and that there ought to be a better way to get more for ratepayers' money. So why end utility energy efficiency programs? One is significant failure to meet the energy savings goals. While the utilities make very large claims for how much savings they've achieved, when the CPUC Energy Division has done an ex ante, which just basically means a review of the energy savings, they found that the savings were only 93% of the goals. When they did an ex post, which is a evaluation where they go into the field, where they look at the questions of free ridership, they find that it's only at 61%. We think from looking at the CPUC records that it's actually closer to 50%. And the net energy saving goals for the 2010-2012 program actually decrease despite overall a 42% increase in energy efficiency programs. So we really feel that the energy efficiency utility run program is a situation where we're spending more and more money and getting less and less return. The second thing is that the bonuses are paid despite performance shortfalls. The preliminary CPUC staff report estimated utility savings in 2006 at 65 to 85% of the goal, which means that they would get zero bonus. The utilities demanded a $152 million advance payment, claiming that they had promised Wall Street 2008 shareholder returns. The administrative law judge awarded utilities zero in advance, saying they should wait 2 months for the final report. President Peavy won a vote to award the utilities an $82.2 million advance at the December 18, 2008 PUC meeting. The final CPUC staff report, based upon energy savings, utilities were entitled only to a $3.6 million in bonus. SoCalGas was the only one of the 4 companies that met their goals, but due to an earlier CPUC ruling, the $78.6 million overpayment was never refunded to customers. This is a pattern that continues over and over. In spite of failing to meet performance benchmarks, the utilities will get paid the bonuses anyway. We don't think that's a lot of incentive for them. The energy efficiency savings have not reduced usage or carbon. If you look at energy consumption trends post-2005, what we find is that you can have energy savings, because energy efficiency doesn't measure how much overall was saved, but how much was saved from a trajectory of going up. In other words, the difference between what we would have used and what we did use. And sometimes that means that the energy consumption can still go up while we have energy savings. Between 2005 and 2008, there was a per capita increase of 3%. So let me go to the next slide, because I think this is really important. This is a chart that looks at total California energy consumption. And if you look at this pink line, this is the energy consumption, and if you look at that line in the middle, is up until 2005. And you see that in 2005, the AB 32 trajectory shows that our energy usage, the blue lines, needs to be going down. But in fact, you see that past 2005, it's continued to go up. This is a real issue because what it shows is that energy efficiency has failed to start bringing the trajectory down in spite of the billions of dollars we're funding. If you look at the very next slide, we have this is Energy Commission data. We have an old series that shows on the left that energy efficiency programs were estimated as contributing a great deal of energy savings when you look at building standards and appliance standards. But in the right, when the Energy Commission has recalculated, and actually this top space is the price of electricity has a great deal to do with people saving energy. And if you look at this, the smallest component is that little blue spot is IOU energy efficiency programs, and it is the most expensive of any of these. So this is why we, in the very last slide, believe that there ought to be independent energy reduction management, that we need to reframe energy efficiency to reducing energy consumption, because we have to do more than just use energy more wisely. In order to meet AB 32 goals, we actually have to reduce the overall consumption of electricity. The energy efficiency programs are simply not designed to do so. Independent energy reduction management would increase the ability to focus on long-term investments such as HVAC, weatherization, white roofs, over short-term fixes such as the light bulbs, and it will redirect hundreds of millions of dollars annually for administrative costs and shareholder bonuses. And my last word is on jobs. Let me tell you, there have been programs like the community action programs that have done weatherization for 30 years. There are community action programs in every single county in the state of California, and their programs also create jobs. So I just got to be clear that the utilities are not the only entity out here that has the capacity to create good jobs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, a couple of questions for Ms. Clinton. I'm just looking for the page in your presentation to refer to. I think it was part of the evaluation or lessons learned. Sort of the folks who are, okay, page 6, number 2, capturing the wide-ranging motivations of end users. I'm sure it sounds like there was some study or analysis on folks who are more likely to participate in programs versus those who weren't. I know this is census time, so we have this term hard to count census tracts or populations. Who are the hard to motivate or involve participants in energy efficiency?
Well, first of all, you're right. We did commission some research through the utilities to do this. The interesting thing is it's not an easy one-liner explanation of who's hard to motivate or who has the potential. What this research realized was that a lot goes into people's social and political values, and then what motivates them. Are they motivated by economics? Are they motivated by environment? Are they motivated by doing something that's good for their community? And so I think the important takeaway from this is that this is going to be extremely helpful information going forward to sort of shape the message.
But what did it tell us other than we know there's some folks out there who are tougher to convince? Can we pinpoint, even if it's not sort of ethnically or economically, but at least geographically, are we able to pinpoint parts of the state?
Yeah, I think off the top of my head, the analysis told us that there's probably a larger population of remaining customers who are good targets for taking energy efficiency action, and we just have not exhausted our creativity in trying to figure out how to communicate with them.
I'd love to see some follow-up there and to work with you on that follow-up.
I'd be happy to provide that.
Topics of previous hearings and even legislation on how to further educate and motivate folks comparing their utility bills with that of similar households, similar neighbors as one tool. So we're paying attention, and we'd like to drill down on that a little bit. Second, on, again, pardon, I don't have the page numbers easily at hand, but
The lower left corner, I think, has the page
yeah,
numbers.
no, I'm just looking for the right page. On page 7, you talk about RD&D and emerging technology as part of the end-to-end strategic plans. Can you name a couple of the emerging technologies that are either near or we're very hopeful about?
Now you're going to challenge me. There are hundreds of different.
That's my job.
Yeah, there are hundreds of technologies that are sort of the targets of the emerging technologies. Some of them have to do with new air conditioning components. Some of them have to do with controls. Some of them have to do with new lighting. I think LED lighting a few years back was a target of the emerging technologies program. So the thrust is to figure out which ones are going to work, are going to have the right properties, and then to get them into the promotional activities. And then ultimately, the longer-term strategy is we identify them through peer and emerging technologies. We then incentivize them through the utility programs. And then once they get to certain scale, as well as bringing economies of scale on the price, then they're more ripe for the Energy Commission to consider in adopting into minimum standards.
So
in
recent years it was light bulbs, you said? Yeah, LEDs.
That was just an example off the top of my head. I said there are hundreds.
So going forward, is there a big 5 list of, we have high hopes for? You mentioned air conditioners.
Yeah, I'd be happy to find out. I know there is a top list. I don't know it off the top of my head. I'd be more than happy to get that for you.
Okay. And last question for now. Your chart on page 8, the $3.1 billion and how you sort of segment it out by category, the largest two being residential and commercial sectors. I assume that somehow follows an analysis of potential to be achieved in each of those sectors. Can you spend 30 seconds on that?
Sure. The residential and commercial sectors typically account for each about a third of the potential, and then the industrial, ag, and other kinds of facilities usually represent the latter. Residential and commercial are more homogeneous. It's a little bit easier to go after them with programs. When you get into the industrial and ag sectors, you get a little bit more specialized.
Let me be devil's advocate for a second here, because we also bragged in the state of California about having the highest standards, certainly for residential, I believe for commercial as well, on energy efficiency for buildings. So how is that the biggest sources of potential savings going forward?
Probably 95% of these programs are targeting existing buildings. So we're trying to go either above the standards that existed at the time they were built, or in many cases, more than half of the residential homes in the state were built before there were any standards for efficiency.
So I would imagine that breakdown then, that 23%, the vast majority of it goes to older housing stock versus the housing stock in the last 20 years or so?
Sure, absolutely. And then you'll see there's a small wedge for new construction. It's just 4%. So you can see that the emphasis is on the existing and the older stock.
Okay. Questions from members of the committee? Sure. Senator Dutton. Get ready, Mark.
No, just a couple. My ears kind of perked up when you were talking about impact evaluation, and I saw cost effectiveness analysis, impact findings together with economic tools, and I was just, if you can kind of expand on what you're talking about. Are you actually talking about that there was some type of economic impact analysis that was done, or just so I make sure I understand what you're telling me about this?
Sure. First of all, California has had something called the standard practice for cost effectiveness. It's a standard practice methodology. It's been around for 20 or 30 years. It's been used by the Energy Commission, by the PUC, by the utilities. It looks at primarily what are the avoided costs, and from a resource perspective, from demand-side programs. How do we save money in not expanding the capital investment in generation and T&D. It's run through, the standard methodology is run through a particular calculator model. The inputs are basically how many customers participated, what were the unit energy savings. We factor in that if you save energy at a meter, you did not incur the losses of sending it through a transmission and distribution lines. It factors in the environmental benefits. It has a value for avoided carbon. It's a standard methodology. All of the programs are analyzed through this standard tool.
Are you? Do you look at residential users differently than you look at business users?
From the point of view of resources, there's no difference. Where it would differ from is at the customer level, because they each have different retail rates, and so the economic value to the participating customer will be different depending upon the kind of rate structure that they're on. But from a resource perspective, a kilowatt hour or therm saved by an industrial customer is just as valuable as one earned from a residential.
Yeah, there again, I'm trying to get more to the understanding cost, because the comment was made that we've got the cheapest energy. Now, I think that's. I'll switch gears over to. Is it? Let's see. Who am I talking to here? Let's see. Laura, you had made you made a statement about our energy cost is actually cheaper. You were talking based on production.
Our energy, I think I was mentioning our energy bills are lower than the average, and then also the energy to get, the cost to get energy efficiency is less than the alternative sources.
Well, as far as the bills, were you talking about residential and business combined, or are you just talking about business?
I believe that I think that one that I referenced was residential.
Because I can't find it in the report here. The only thing I saw was a chart that would seem to indicate business.
Okay, we have.
It looked like you were measuring it based on products or product production, or it looks like it was a production.
Oh, you were referring to the economic productivity per kilowatt hour spent? Is that the graph you're referencing? We have another handout that I didn't provide today on AB 32 fact sheet that specific fact came from that I'd be happy to give to you.
Yeah.
But if you want to get to that economic graph.
Yeah, well, it's on page 3. You were showing that productivity of electrical consumption, and so you were showing that. What I'm trying to get around to, you made the statement we have the cheapest power, but you're the only person that I've heard say that.
I don't think I'm implying that we have the cheapest power per se, but per kilowatt hour spent or used, we have the highest productivity.
Okay. Well, how would my next door neighbor, how would you characterize it for them? Are they going to tell me that we're paying less than anybody else, and they got a brand new house, got all the latest efficiencies, they're using less power than their previous home, but it's costing them more? Is there a problem there I should know about? Because they're asking me that question, so I'm curious about when you say we have the cheapest power, the average person out there thinks they're paying less money to Edison and PG&E and all the power companies, but they're not.
Well, we have lower bills, so I think that's what they're more interested in than the
average person is actually interested in how much money is taken out of their pocket. At least that's my wife's concern anyway.
Right, and that comes from the bills, not from the rates. So regardless of what the rates are in California, the average bills are still lower than the rest of the nation.
Well, not the comparison that we've done. Looking at different types of bills for multifamily housing, things like this, I mean, you get involved with looking at the dollars, and you do look at usage, because I try to look for waste that's happening. I'm doing comparisons and stuff, but I'm not seeing what the end result is. When time you get done with all the taxes, charges, everything else you're talking about, it's more than what it was before. So I'm having a hard time equating what you're saying is saying I can't tell the average person out there they're paying less when they write it out of their checkbook, it's more.
Well, I guess it sounds like you're referring to it's costing more than it cost before, and I'm referring to it's costing less than anywhere else in the country for the average bill.
See, the average person right now, especially during this recession, they are concerned about everywhere else. They're concerned with the fact that it's costing me more. I'm turning off lights. I'm doing all these things. I've cut down my energy usage as much as possible, and yet when I cut the check, I'm not really saving any money, and they don't care about all the other stuff, and so that's what I'm trying to equate to.
Okay, if you
when you're saying what you're saying, then it sounds like everybody's paying less money, but they're really not. They may be paying less than they would have been paying.
I think that's a significant point as well.
Okay. You want to? I can see you're chopping at the bit here. So.
Well, it's interesting because I really want to get to the point of your question. I think you've seen the charts that show that the energy usage in the rest of the country has continued to go up, per capita, and in California, the per capita has been more even. And so I think that's part. So part of what happens is that people in other parts of the country are using more energy, partly because, for the most part, there are more temperature extremes in many parts of the country than many parts in California, not all of it, but many parts of California has relatively temperate climate. That's one reason why, even though we pay more per kilowatt hour on average than most states, our actual bills are in fact less because we're using less kilowatt hours. So that's one. But let me get back to why people perceive that their bills are much higher. And I think there's a psychological thing that most people, when they think of their bills, think of their highest bills. People don't average it in their head, the bills for 12 months. They think, wow, my highest bill last year was $400, and this year my highest bill was $750? I remember last year I didn't pay more than $400, and this year I paid $750. And that could be because there was one summer month where it was extremely hot. They had to use their air conditioning. We know all about these inclining block rates. I'm not justifying it, but I'm trying to really answer your question of why people feel the way they do. It is a legitimate feeling. We hear it all the time at Turn, but often it's because people really remember their highest bill. They don't average out their 12 months in their minds.
I think what it is Edison just does a really good job of letting people know what they use, because on your little utility bill you have a chart there that shows what your usage was, and so you can go up to like 24 months. Okay, and so what my wife actually does is she'll go here, okay, I paid X number of dollars in this month, and 2 years ago I paid this. Okay, and then she compares it each month, but she looks at the usage, and because you're making it real easy for them to do that. And actually, my wife thinks it's a great tool, but she's looking at her usage. She really prides herself in keeping the usage down. But then when she takes a look at the actual check she cuts, she finds that she's getting rewarded by being more efficient by having to cost her more. So that's where the frustration comes from. I think maybe we might be moving too quickly in a direction. People don't see the economic benefit, at least from the average, at least from my wife's perspective.
And guess what service territory Senator Dutton lives in?
Edison, that's right. Except
Let me sort of interject one modifier to one of the comments that Mark Tony made, and that was the temperate climates in the state and where most people live. On a going forward basis, we can see where the faster growing regions of the state are. And they're not coastal.
No, they're not.
So you talk about areas of the state where more and more population is, and you do have the temperature fluctuations seasonally and daily during certain times of the year. So this is a big dynamic, I think, to respect and acknowledge on a going forward basis. And at risk of being imperfect in an analogy, another way to think about it is it's one thing to talk about gas prices, fuel per gallon at the pump, one gas station to the next, or in California versus the other. But whether you drive a Prius or a Hummer is also a relevant part of the equation. In California, the gas at the pump may be a little bit more expensive, but if we're living in Priuses, it offsets. I think that the housing or energy efficiency analogy that we're trying to discuss here.
The only question is, where are you? Because if the gas is $2 a gallon in Arizona, drive over and get it.
So,
San Diego,
Mr. Chairman?
Mexico.
Senator Kehoe.
Thank you. I just, on this discussion of the rates, Dr. Tony, I think what the whole dialogue between Senator Dutton and the panel has been very interesting. What about the tiered rate structure? Are we, when you get into those upper tiers and you have increased usage, say the 24-hour air conditioning in the hot summer weeks, then you get that super rate at the very top. Could that be part of these spikes that customers see on their bills going, well, what the heck is going on? The $700 bill when you're used to paying, half that or less.
It is absolutely the case that in particularly hot summer months, because air conditioning is the major consumer of electricity, central home air conditioning, because of the, I mean, you've got two problems. One is that the higher tiers, you're paying a lot more, but in the past, because for the past 8 or 9 years, the lower usage baseline rates were completely frozen, all of rate increases had to go strictly to those top 3 tiers, tiers 3, 4, and 5. Now, we have at least addressed that somewhat through SB 695, which Senator Kehoe authored, by permitting an increase in tiers 1 and 2 between 3 and 5% per year. The challenge is this, however. If utility rates the increases are approved by the CPUC in excess of 3 to 5% during those years, then we will still see the top tier rates continue to rise disproportionately. That's simple math. If the CPUC exercises restraint in rate increases and provides overall rate increases less than what is allowed to go up in tiers 1 and 2, then we can start to see some moderation over time, some leveling over time. So
if the rates under the PUC's guidance do not go to the maximum, there's more of an opportunity for smoothing some of those bills in the upper tiers.
Exactly. It all depends on how the PUC approves rate increases. That's what it depends on.
And I also want to make a comment on the chairman's point earlier of education and outreach on energy efficiency. I live in San Diego, where the rates may be high, but the bills are pretty small. I'm lucky enough I don't have an air conditioning in my home, and I rarely miss it. So, I've got a very moderate part of the city that I live in, and climate-wise. And but, I look at my bill every month, and I see programs for people who qualify on energy efficiency, and actually there's a light bulb exchange in a couple of weekends that's open to everybody. But mostly I see, unless I'm missing something, in my SDG&E territory, I see programs for energy efficiency and other kinds of assistance that are aimed at low-income families that qualify. And so for a person like myself, there isn't a whole lot of guidance about how you can make a almost 100-year-old home, which is what I live in, more energy efficient. I see advertisings in the newspapers for better windows, but it's all kind of take your own initiative. No idea what kind of insulation I have in the attic, if any. So I wonder if there's some better outreach and education the PUC could do for the entire market. If you had $1,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 to spend on efficiency improvements, where would be your the best way to go? I have no idea how you get that done. Thank you. Go ahead. Tell me.
Thank you, Senator Kehoe. Gene Rodriguez of Southern California Edison. There's actually two parts to the answer. One, when Commissioner Gruenig was up here speaking earlier, one of the things that you should take heart in is the fact that the PUC has undertaken, quite frankly, an exhaustive evaluation of prior statewide marketing, education, and outreach activities to guide all of us in how we should approach it in the future, with an eye, quite frankly, especially in this economy, on getting the biggest bang for the buck. Keeping costs down, getting more impact. The second part is, as you'll see in this next panel, as a teaser for what is to come, is that Mark Gaines from San Diego Gas and Electric and SoCal Gas is going to be here, and he'll talk a little bit about the programs. But I can tell you is part of the reason you see so much information in the marketplace today around what the lowest income customers or income qualified customers can do to get on both a care rate, reduce their rate for energy, but also to be treated in these energy efficiency programs for low-income consumers is, at this juncture, quite frankly, those who are most economically at risk. It is a significant focus both for the utilities and the PUC to ensure that we are extremely loud in the market to try to get all of those folks on the rates they deserve to be on and on the energy efficiency programs that will reduce the amount of energy they use and, quite frankly, reduce the amount of subsidy then that we will have to provide from other ratepayers to do that. So I would invite you to...
My point is, and that's very important work, but there's a whole other bunch of homeowners out there that could use some direction and guidance as to how best to improve the energy efficiency of their home.
And let me just add a note to that. One of the things that the PUC has directed the utilities to emphasize in this current next 3-year cycle is a whole house retrofit approach. And so we're saying what makes sense is to approach the homeowner or the occupant with a whole house approach, sort of a menu of all the things that are possible, help to prioritize the best bets, and also to where there are available municipal financing programs to make the homeowners or occupants aware that they may have an opportunity to finance a number of these mechanisms on the property and sort of have a long-term financing mechanism that way.
And I think in my district, another good point would be, and maybe for some of our other districts, and I suppose we shouldn't be picking technology and all like that, but the cost efficiency of energy efficiency as opposed to, say, individual rooftop solar, I think consumers should get some information about that too, because there are cheaper ways to go than rooftop solar, though it appeals to people. They think they're doing the right thing and going green, and they might be able to, my understanding is it could reach very similar targets with much less investment, and I think we should put that out there.
You would be very pleased to learn that it is, in fact, the policy of the Public Utilities Commission to ensure that any California IOU customer who participates in the California Solar Initiative program, they must take an energy efficiency audit first and certify that they can do that. I can also tell you that, as I'm also the manager of the California Solar Initiative program for Southern California Edison, as well as our low-income programs, as well as the efficiency programs. So as we educate for the California Solar Initiative program, that is a key message that we get out there, that if you have limited capital to invest, and every single person has limited capital to invest, you should first invest in reducing the amount of energy your home requires, and then invest in rooftop solar, and it better be on a white roof, for goodness sake.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions, comments for this panel? Seeing none, thank you all very much. Moving on to our next panel, looking forward, how do we improve upon what we've done? Dave Ashukian from the Division of Ratepayer Advocates, Gene Rodriguez, I believe you're staying up here, on behalf of Southern California Edison, Jan Berman from Pacific Gas and Electric, and Mark Gaines from Sempra Energy.
Good morning. Good morning. Let's see if I can get this one to work. So I have to be closer? Okay. Okay. I'm Dave Ashukian, the Deputy Director for Energy for the Division of Ratepayer Advocates.
Go right ahead.
Okay. You know who we are. I wanted to actually start off by, just addressing the comments that Senator Padilla started off with, that we totally agree with, and that is that energy efficiency is the lowest cost strategy to meet our our state policy goals and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I also want to address the 2 points that both Senator Padilla and Senator Dutton made regarding the cost effectiveness of energy efficiency. And that is that compared to any other resource, energy efficiency is the lowest cost resource. One of the things that we have recommended in achieving greenhouse gas goals, we recommended to both the Public Utilities Commission as well as the Air Resources Board, is that we establish a greenhouse gas reduction loading order such that we start with the lowest cost strategies to meet our greenhouse gas reductions and then move up to the next lowest cost strategies. Back in 2000
Okay, we're good to go? What? And does it matter, should he use the regular mic? You use the one, okay. And the sergeant can turn it on from her station.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. That sounds good.
Let's proceed.
Okay, so I was just talking about the concept of a loading order, and that energy efficiency is essentially at the top of that loading order, both for achieving the state's overall policy in meeting our resources, but it's also at the top of the loading order for the lowest cost strategy to meet greenhouse gas reductions. And we think that that should be compared to other strategies, not just against energy efficiency against itself. As we heard about the fact that energy efficiency is compared, whether it's cost effective, it's compared to whether it's cost effective in costing as much as the program for energy efficiency. It's not compared against other strategies that the state has embarked upon, such as renewables, such as solar, such as other strategies. So we think that actually more energy efficiency should be considered, because it is the lowest cost way to achieve more than just energy efficiency goals. Regarding Senator Dutton's comment about, well, why do rates keep going up while we achieve these energy efficiency goals? The simple answer to that is, if you looked at that graph, I don't remember who presented it, but the per capita consumption of energy in California is flat. However, our rates are not flat, and until the per capita consumption actually drops to compensate for the increase in rates, that's the only time you'll actually get flat rates, and the consumption will have to decrease faster than the rates are increasing in order for us to actually achieve lower monthly bills. So in fact, until we actually start decreasing our total energy consumption, our rates will continue to go up, even though on a per capita basis we may be getting better than we were in the past. I have 3 points to talk about looking forward in achieving our energy reduction plan. The Commission has adopted this strategic plan. It's a great plan for achieving energy efficiency goals. However, that plan isn't being adopted and followed as efficiently as we think it could be. One of the things I wanted to point out that all the energy efficiency programs in California are funded by ratepayers. So when we hear about the utilities doing these programs that are good for achieving these goals, it's truly the ratepayers that are paying for these projects, not the utilities themselves. And they're being directed by the state policies to do these programs and being paid to administer these programs. So it's truly the ratepayers hiring the utilities as a contractor to achieve these programs. The three major points that we want to point out it relates to the shareholder incentive mechanism, are the goals that are falling short of AB 32, the metrics that have been adopted in AB 32 to meet a greenhouse gas reduction, and that more focus should be made on market transformation. Regarding shareholder incentives, they were designed to actually compensate for the utilities' loss of energy production if it wasn't for the energy efficiency program. No other state policy that has been mandated will give an incentive for what would happen if that policy is not achieved. Yet that's what the shareholder incentive is designed to do. In addition, that's like giving money to a coal-fired power plant developer because they can't develop coal anymore, and we're going towards renewables. We don't do that for the fossil fuel developers, but yet we're doing that to provide shareholders what they would have gotten had they not achieved energy efficiency. And there are no incentives outlined as necessary in the strategic plan as well. The second point is on IOU portfolio goals that have been lowered by 40% due to the utilities identifying that they can't achieve the goals that they had initially started off with. That's like saying that we hired a contractor that isn't capable of building a design that we like, and therefore we're going to change our design to meet that contractor's abilities rather than looking for a new contractor that can achieve those goals. We think that the programs should look at other options to have a new contractor that are able to achieve the goals that we have set out for the program that have been identified in the strategic plan as achievable. And lastly, we think more emphasis should be made on market transformation. The strategic plan outlines how market transformation is truly the goal of the program to get people to start understanding that energy efficiency should happen on itself and that there's a market push to do that so that we don't have to continue to pay for incentives like continuing to pay for people to have a CFL. When they know CFLs are out there, they may not have 100% CFLs in their home, but they know that CFLs are valuable. We don't need to continue to pay for CFL programs. Again, the strategic plan has laid out a process for identifying metrics, criteria for achieving market transformation. We think that that should be focused on so that market transformation becomes the focus and the center point for energy efficiency programs in the future. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Actually, it's Mark Gaines from Semper Utilities. I've been chosen to give the overview for the statewide programs and then a brief discussion about some local programs that we're doing in San Diego. So I've got two presentations. First one on California IOU 2010 to 12 overview. The first page has been discussed previously by other speakers. It basically goes over the aggregate programs, the $3.1 billion. I think the things the
Which one are we on?
I'm sorry. We're on the one that's titled Cover. It's coming around. It's titled Presentation on California Investor-Owned Utilities, 2010 to 12.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a brief comment while they bring the papers around to Mr. Ashukian? So the contractor who can't deliver on the design, are we not going to deal with our utilities anymore? I mean, what would you propose instead?
There are other areas in the states, actually in the Northwest. The utilities up there have actually they have hired a separate entity to administer and design a market transformation program. That is one potential option for doing that. It's not necessarily taking all the programs away from the utilities, but certain aspects can be.
We've done that in San Diego, haven't we, with the Center for Sustainability? Not exclusively on energy efficiency, but on related alternatives.
For the solar initiative, they manage that program. Yes.
Yeah, and it's workable, but I don't know that it's transformative.
Well,
Just my comment, so I just wanted to get your extra thoughts on that.
All right, returning to my presentation, slide 2, again, is the summary of the aggregate programs, $3.1 billion. I think the point to focus on here is the benefits. We've got 7 billion kilowatt hours saved. We've got 3 power plants avoided, and you've got 3 million tons of CO2 equivalent avoided. That's where the cost effectiveness comes in, and as was shown earlier, energy efficiency is the cheapest way to avoid those costs. Turning to the next slide, talks a little bit about where we're headed with our programs in 2010. We're looking, as Commissioner Grunick talked about, the strategic plan. We're looking at transforming our programs and looking longer term rather than getting just short-term savings. 3 issues here to focus on that we're changing. First is the 3 big, bold strategies dealing with moving towards zero net energy buildings for both residential and commercial, and moving towards a air conditioning systems that are designed specifically for the climate here in California to make them more efficient. Another area we're looking at transforming is looking at integrating our messages across programs. That's energy efficiency, solar, demand response, all of the environmental programs administered by the PUC. We're looking at messaging those and implementing those collectively to not only reduce costs, but also increase participation in each of those programs, providing the customer with an overall message on how they can manage their energy. And the third area is looking at codes and standards, longer term, on how we make sure that those are implemented well and the savings are achieved. Turning to the next page, we look at our historical programs that we're not ignoring how we're achieving short-term energy savings, and we're looking at improving those as well. A few instances here, we do have rebates and incentive programs for both commercial, residential, and industrial customers. We're continuing those, continuing to modify those and make them more effective, but they are continuing. We have appliance recycling and efficiency programs for new construction as well. So comprehensive programs for not only looking long-term, but also short-term. Turning to the next page, some enhancements to those short-term programs. And the first one here, Senator Keogh, is the one you would probably be interested in, where we're looking at whole house retrofit programs. This will be started statewide, goal of achieving broader and deeper savings in homes. Those will be programs that are offered to the customer to give them audits on what is available to them, and then gives them options on incentives that they can utilize to retrofit their homes, not only for issues like your air conditioner, your insulation, your windows, caulking, broad spectrum, as well as lighting inside the home. Other ones would be the electronics program. The largest load growth in our homes these days is new electronic equipment. Your TV sets that we're multiplying in large numbers, the DVRs that support those, the stereo systems that support those, all of those are adding load. So we're looking at a program to make sure that the buyers of those technologies understand which ones are Energy Star and which ones save the most money, and drive the market towards those most efficient electronics. Benchmarking, we want to make sure, I'm sorry.
How much of your load growth comes from the electronics? Can you identify it?
I don't know the percentage offhand. I know that's the largest.
Because you hear that all the time, but I don't know if I know a number.
I don't know a number offhand either.
If you would talk to your folks in San Diego and let me know, I'd be really interested.
Sure.
Thank you.
Benchmarking, it was mentioned earlier about comparing your house to versus your neighbors. We actually have a program existing in San Diego on that, but we're expanding that to not only include homes, but businesses, where the businesses can get ratings. So the purchaser or the leasee of a building will know the energy rating of that building. It can factor that into the terms of their lease and whether that's the location they want to locate at. Retro commissioning, we're spending a lot of money to put energy efficient equipment into the buildings. We want to make sure that they're maintained and operated and achieve the savings that they were intended to over the long run. So that's what retro commissioning will look at. And then advanced consumer lighting. We've talked about CFLs. The market is transforming. It's not completely transformed yet, but there's still a large percentage of sockets in the home that are not using CFLs, either can't or it's difficult to access those. There's new technologies, LEDs coming along. We want to make sure that we fully maximize the retrofit of lighting because that's still one of the bigger usage inside the home and the greatest opportunity for us to save. Moving to the next slide, we've got some outreach efforts that we're doing statewide, a few of them listed here. We've got training centers for each of the utilities that we offer that certify contractors to come in and implement our programs. We also have workforce education and training programs that educate not only school children, but newly graduated individuals so they can work in this environment. And then we've got pilot programs that are looking to even push that stronger in the future. The last couple slides I'll skip. They're basically a discussion of the regulatory process at the PUC and provided for information purposes only. I do have another presentation that's briefly discussing the local programs, a couple of them that we have in San Diego. I don't know whether this has been passed out yet or not. It says presentation. Okay, great. I'll quickly go through that one. The second page on that one talks about just the San Diego specific programs, costs and benefits, but game changers that I want to make sure everybody's aware of that we're looking at here. Financing. We have an unbilled financing program that's very active in San Diego that allows commercial customers $5,000 and above to get zero interest financing. They're paid for on their electric bill, so the savings on the electric bill more than offsets the cost of that bill or of the loan. So it makes for a very effective program. And then we see the complementary program for residential is the PACE programs. We're working very closely with our cities and counties to try to get those up and running and utilize those as much as we can to allow residential customers to take advantage of higher cost energy efficiency options. The other game changer is technology. I guess the common term is there's an app for that, and there is more and more apps being developed for energy efficiency that we want to take advantage of that provide feedback and information. I'll talk about that in a moment. So one of the interesting pilots that we're doing in San Diego is called our microgrid. We see the electricity system of the future at some point, 10, 20 years from now, when we have lots of distributed generation, renewables. We were trying to model a system where we can stand alone and actually operate a system that's self-healing and self-supporting. It would be a single system right now on a substation where we will maximize the energy efficiency, maximize demand response, then go to distributed solar and distributed generation. So you'd have a standalone system and operate that, and you've got system requirements that will develop for that kind of a system that don't exist today, where the renewables go up and down, where you need to utilize all of your local control to make sure the system is managed. So we see this as representing what the electric system, a grid, will look like in the future, and we're going to do it on a pilot basis, following the loading order. Again, maximize energy efficiency and demand response first. And the second one, going into the technology, the graphic here shows a continuum of what we see are opportunities for the information that's coming out of these new applications, from the very minimum of just feedback of what your usage is, moving up to direct load control, and all the way up to the maximum where we have a whole house or a whole building energy management system. I was at Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas earlier this year. Tremendous number of new businesses that are getting into this technology and providing options. The question on the table is, what's the optimal functionality, what will customers buy, and what's the marketing that will get them to buy that. So we're going to be looking at that this year. We've got several pilots that we're involved in at the moment. We've got Google that we're already partnering with that will give you day-later information on the web of what your usage is. We've got O-Power that gives you monthly feedbacks on your bill and greater granulation on opportunities for you. And we got a third one, a detectant, that actually looks at your load profile and hopefully, if it works, we'll be able to tell what equipment you have in the home and how efficient it is without us ever stepping foot in your house. So then we can give you direct feedback on perhaps your air conditioner is losing efficiency and you need to replace it now, and here's how much money you could save specifically on your air conditioner. Last page is a little bit of evidence on what is happening in the marketplace for this technology. On the left-hand side, a couple of completely dedicated companies that look at energy management technologies, Control4 and OpenPeak, and both of those are new. On the right-hand side, you have competing technologies with Google and Intel, older companies that are getting into the same space. All of these are developing new market opportunities, new technology that we can use in the home that we want to make sure we take advantage of going forward. And that's into my presentation.
Are these, the last couple pages, are they dependent on the smart meters?
Partially. It depends. Some of the options can operate without smart meters, and some of them require smart meters.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators, for having me here today. I'm Jan Berman, and I'm PG&E's Senior Director of Demand-Side Management Policy and Integrated Planning. And much as I would like to talk about every slide in my presentation, I'm going to try to stick to just highlighting a few things. It's the big blue one that I think is being passed around just now. And because there was some dialogue about this earlier, I thought I would just point you to page 2, where we have some statistics about the 2010 to 2012 goals, including the estimated net societal benefit of this is just PG&E's programs for the period 2010 to 2012 at $423 million. Then I thought I would highlight a couple of new programs that I'm really excited about. One is on page 9. And that's our new Whole House program that all of us are launching and that there's been some dialogue about today. When I joined energy efficiency area about 20 years ago, this was the big question. How do you get deeper energy savings from existing housing stock, especially when the consumer's considering a remodel or having doors or windows or anything about the house's structure open? How do you get them to go farther in energy efficiency savings? That's going to be the focus of the new program that's being launched in 2010 to 2012. And I'm very excited about our focus with the contracting industry, because I think that's a new way to look at bringing the contractor and the residential consumer additional opportunities to get deep savings. Then I secondly wanted to talk about the area of behavior change, which others have mentioned and which is on page 10. I think it's mentioned in the Pavley Bill SB 488 that was passed to provide customers information that allows them to compare their energy use to that of others. That is to say, others in their neighborhood, others with similarly sized houses, similar family sizes, so that people can understand, do I really use more or less energy than my neighbors? And then another key step is, if I use more energy, why is that, and what should I do about it? And that's very actionable information for consumers. Some testing in other areas of the state and nationwide have shown that just providing this information can create savings of about 1.5 to 3% for consumers. It starts with changes in behavior, but then with tips and recommendations, it moves on to changes in appliances and even can be changes in the housing stock and structure. Mark mentioned some of the other back-end analytics that are getting so much more powerful. So I'll say in the old days, tips used to just be based on your consumer class. We would know general tips that would help a residential customer save energy. Now, using information from meter data, from other publicly available information about housing stock, age, square footage, other rebate programs you may have participated in, we can really provide customers with customized, unique tips for their house and how to save energy in their particular house. And that's really exciting in the world of energy efficiency, is how to do that more cheaply and more easily than having you sit at a computer and answer 1,000 audit questions. We've issued an RFP November of 2009 to get started in this area, and we're negotiating on that contract right now. And then finally, on page 14, another topic that was discussed was the low-income energy efficiency programs. And we just have a statistic on our number of low-income homes treated last year in 2009. It was 83,347 just for PG&E, and then we'll be ramping up from there quite considerably in 2010. Thank you.
And thank you again, Senators. Gene Rodriguez again, this time wearing my Southern California Edison hat. The presentation that is coming around is the Edison presentation. The presentation is long-winded. It has many pages, so let me be uncharacteristically brief and take you just to 4 pages that I think would spark your interest. If you would start at page 9, I will take you through 4 quick snapshots of programs that are among all of our programs that I was hoping you might be interested in, but what we do is try to cover, again, every possible energy-saving approach, possible energy-saving technology, every possible way to mine energy efficiency. First and foremost, let me tell you a brag story, because I did want to start off with a brag story about California. Page 9, you see the residential, low-income, and small business customers participating in our recycling program for inefficient refrigerators and appliances. It's often said that California is the model for energy efficiency in the rest of the country. This program, Edison's program, was the mold for what the U.S. EPA kicked off 2 years ago, the Responsible Appliance Disposal Program. Edison and the other California IOUs are among the founders of that program, and it is based on the long-term success of Southern California Edison's program, which is the most successful appliance recycling program in the United States of America in the history of energy efficiency. Why does this work? It's very, very simple. Again, if we were to ask you, how many of you have replaced a light bulb in the last year, every hand in this room would go up. But if you were to ask folks in a room of this size, how many of you replaced a refrigerator recently, you're not going to see a lot of hands go up. And the fact of the matter is, what we must be able to do in our programs among the investor-owned utilities is find ways to be at that precise moment of time when people are going to take an action. We provide incentives for Energy Star appliances, Energy Star refrigerators, so they would buy a better refrigerator, and then we make sure that they do not take that old, inefficient refrigerator and put it in the garage to keep a six-pack of soda or maybe a case of beer cold. Because that old energy refrigerator not only uses more energy, but it can run up in Southern California, Edison's territory, their energy bill about $312 a year on average. Because untreated airspace, old inefficient appliance, chugging away 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So what we do is create a turnkey kind of program where they contact SCE either on the phone or through our website, etc. We come out, we send out a truck that comes out, picks up the old appliance, cut the cord, so make sure it's, number one, we plug it in to see if it works, then cut the cord so it cannot be used, and that way it does not wind up in the secondary market, or worse yet, in a home creating more energy usage that's not necessary. Second program, as Jan did, I had put in the energy efficiency program for low-income households. When we talk about low-income customers or income-qualified customers, we're talking about 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. So this is not a program for the very, very few of Southern California Edison's customers. In fact, it's about 25% of our residential base. What we do with this program is provide to customers an energy efficiency upgrade on their home, everything from certainly the lights, because it's in every room, and we can reduce usage by 2/3 to 3/4 with that, but weatherization, refrigerators, evaporative coolers, pool pumps if there's a retired couple living in a home that still has a pool, torchieres, things of that nature, to for free reduce that customer's energy use in a way that remains cost contained. It's not entirely cost effective against the whole of the portfolio, but when you look at all the benefits of the program, including the security of keeping people in their homes and allowing them to be able to afford their energy bills, it's a program that makes sense for California, legislated by California's legislature, implemented through the PUC with the investor-owned utilities. The next program I wanted to make sure that we don't leave out the small business customers in Southern California Edison's territory. Quite frankly, it's been a long, protracted economic bad period, and our small business customers, we fear, are among the most folks who are most at risk in this kind of economy, and they are not folks who are going to sit around and try to become energy engineers in their building. So we provide them with the same kind of program, the same kind of offering. We go to the small businesses and we offer them a limited set of energy efficiency upgrades, from refrigeration upgrades like curtains to keep the coolers cool, to lighting, to exit signs, etc., to reduce their real cost that they have to pay each and every month, and we do this for free. In both those low-income type programs, one of the things that is always left unsaid is that, again, we are hiring Californians from the neighborhoods, from the cities that we serve to deliver these programs. Another benefit of the programs. And I wanted to end with my last slide on page 12 that gives you a little bit of an idea of what we're doing with local governments. In Southern California Edison, we have partnerships with about 100 of the cities who are in our service territory that are energy efficiency partnerships. And now, I'll let you in a little secret. The little secret is every single city is a valued partner, which means they get to participate in all the programs that are available to them. But if they're willing to step up, if they're willing to partner with us to take energy efficiency into their structures, into their buildings, and deliver it to the citizens and the constituents that they serve, we have a tiered incentive level that is a pay-for-performance, not a pay-for-promise type approach. So if a city, take a Palm Desert in the hottest part of our territory, take another city that's smaller, take a Long Beach, take a this, take a that, if they're willing to partner with us, we work out with them to create an energy plan for the city using resources that we can bring to bear for them to allow them to find a way to make investments in the municipal facilities and to use these sorts of PACE approaches to provide incentives, to provide financing, and to help deliver our programs to each and every one of the residents, each and every one of the businesses in the small cities. This is an economic renewal program. This is an energy efficiency program, and I'm here to tell you it works. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think we're starting to see some recurring themes here from previous panels, this panel, and I believe the next panel. Any new questions or comments from committee?
I was using Long Beach as a contrast.
All right. Okay.
Mayor Bob Foster would kill me if
yeah.
Right. Well, you kind of preempted a couple of questions that I had. One, the biggest one, sort of re-asking the emerging technology or the next big thing, some certain technologies and tools to look at that you did touch on, so I just want to acknowledge that. But maybe if I can ask you to each, in 30 seconds or less, talk about opportunities or expanding on previous comments, opportunities for dovetailing the energy efficiency efforts with the job creation priority of the state.
Yeah, I think it fits very well with our whole house retrofit. Those will all be contractor installed. So refocusing a program from rebates, which are just paying for appliances that maybe are manufactured somewhere else, to retrofit programs locally where local workers install them, I think will have a dramatic impact on the workers that are associated with these programs. And we have the education to make sure those workers are available.
And I would love to invite anyone to Stockton who'd like to come to our training facility in Stockton, where we train all the installers and educators for our low-income program, as well as for the state's LIHEAP program. And it's really wonderful to see that workforce in training.
And as a final point, I would say that if you looked at that low-income small business program that I talked about, as part of the curriculum there, what we do is we have the contractors who are hired to deliver the program through contractual obligation. They are forced to bring some of the members of the communities that they're serving, which is to say, quite frankly, the more economically deprived communities, working with CBOs and faith-based organizations to bring some of the young people in who we train through the program, graduate into what for many folks are their first job in energy efficiency, and quite frankly, for others is a new opportunity to work where they may have lost a job before.
And I'd just like to add that, again, market transformation looks at new opportunities, new technologies, new things. We think that continuing to make sure that every socket in California has a CFL is not achieving the energy efficiency we need, because many of those sockets that do not have CFLs today run at such low hours of the year that it will never be cost effective for those types of programs to be changed. So looking at new technologies, new metrics to determine what should be going next is where those jobs will be created.
Right. And I think similar to statements I made at the outset of the hearing, not only a cost-benefit or cost-effectiveness analysis of energy efficiency programs vis-a-vis renewables, for example, from a dollar standpoint or an emission standpoint, but in addition to that, from a job creation standpoint, I think energy efficiency is still the biggest bang for the buck. Thank you all. Let's go on to the next panel. We've heard from the investor-owned utilities. Let's now hear from the publicly owned utilities. Scott Tomaszewski from Northern California Power Agency, Tom Gackstetter from LA Department of Water and Power, Jim Parks from our own Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and once again, Laura Ettinson from NRDC.
And let me be the first to say good afternoon. I'm Scott Tomaszewski. I'm the Regulatory Affairs Manager at Northern California Power Agency. It's my privilege and my honor to be here this afternoon, to talk about public power energy efficiency programs. And let me say, I also have the opportunity to kind of orchestrate our effort on reporting for energy efficiency within the public power community. So it's not just Northern California Power Agency, it's with California Municipal Utilities Association and Southern California Public Power Authority as well. We released a report late yesterday afternoon to the Energy Commission in compliance with AB 2021 and SB 1037. We are required to submit a status report each March 15th. And in addition to that, we also put together 10-year program targets as well. So that is all included in the report that we submitted yesterday. We will put that on our website. It will be on the CMUA website, and we'll forward that along to you so you have it for your review. I will give you the 3-minute synopsis of 265 pages. The presentation that I provided to you, I would just turn your attention to page 2 as our first and foremost notion when you look at public power and how we address energy efficiency. The notion of one size does not fit all is extremely important to remember in all of that. We are dealing with utilities the size of Los Angeles, which is close to 6,000 megawatts, and utilities as small as 5 megawatts in the city of Biggs. And so we are dealing with 40 utilities, dealing with different climate zones, different customer needs, different economic considerations. We have to look at that in a very much understanding what the customer's needs are. So 3 things I want you to take away from this discussion this afternoon is we do take energy efficiency very seriously. We do that from largest to smallest. It's extremely important. The diversity of that requires us to be a little bit more creative in how we approach it on a year-to-year basis. And the results that we will talk about in the next minute will show that we've made significant progress, even moving further beyond initial numbers from last year. So this is all very good. The reason why we do that is we have a very close relationship with our customer base. And being able to understand what our customers' needs allows us to spend public dollars in the most efficient manner. And if you look at the context of municipal government, local utilities, we have to look at the entire package of dollars that come down as public expenditures. So it's not just the energy loading order, it's actually loading order in terms of local governments and what our constituents need. So that's very important for us. If you just turn to page 4 for just a second, you'll just see that this represents report number 5 that we've provided since 2005, 2 of which are related to targets. As a general framework, there are basic theories and methodologies are fairly consistent with what the Public Utilities Commission uses, and it's just best practices in terms of energy efficiency. We try to take some of the complexity out of how some of the processes are being done because of the size of some of our utilities. They would just be overwhelmed by the amount of documentation and other things. So NCPA, SCAPA, CMUA, we work with our utilities to address those issues. If I turn you over to page 6, we can get a little bit into the the numbers in terms of what our programs are looking at. You can see the changes in investments in energy efficiency since 2005, 2006, that time period. Basically, we said spend all cost-effective energy efficiency. We have taken that to heart, and we look at that in the most efficient manner. That does not suggest, though, that you can spend all your money in particular programs. If you have programs that are cost-effective, you can't necessarily saturate all the programs and then go to the next program. So as an example, you can't take there and distribute all your lights and then go on to the next program. You have to look at it as a portfolio. And I think that point was made earlier this morning. In terms of this year, about $150 million. Again, a significant increase. And the thing that really makes that impressive is we're doing that in probably the worst recession that we've had in decades. So despite the fact that we have some considerable issues in terms of what customer needs are and some of the slowdowns in some of the communities, we're still looking at very sharp increases in terms of energy efficiency expenditures. And the use of our public dollars also allows us to focus them on the most cost-effective programs. So it just does. That's why some of our numbers are going up there. On the next slide, break that down a little bit more so, and one of the questions you'll come into is that LADWP and SMUD represent about 2/3 of public power in terms of peak energy savings and investments, but that doesn't suggest that there's a lot of activity not happening at the smaller utility level. So small utility being from Imperial Irrigation District down to our smallest is still a fairly wide range, but the basic point there is that there still are significant increases in energy efficiency expenditures for small utilities in addition to the healthy increases that LADWP and SMUD have experienced over the last couple of years. Again, it's the story. The story is very consistent across the size and scope of utilities. It's just how we implement them that are the most challenging things. In terms of savings and targets, AB 2021 set a 3-year target setting process. So every 3 years we adopt targets that extend for 10 years. We did that for our first 3-year period. We're in the process of finalizing the adoption of targets for this year. So what you see here is an opportunity to look at where we really are for our first 3-year period. And if you look at the red line that shows up there on slide 8, those are the targets that were essentially adopted by Public Power, and the line next to it are the program savings. And as you see, we've gotten to the point where there's about convergence in terms of where we expected to be and where we said we were going to be. There's been suggestions about, well, are we setting our targets more aggressively enough? Well, you can debate that topic, but that will also have an influence on where we set targets going forward. So we have targets in 2010. The numbers there don't reflect the finalization of targets for LA and SMUD, but it's just there for illustrative purposes. But we are meeting our targets, and we're doing it in the most cost-effective manner. Couple more points to make. In terms of verification, each year we are required to report on our verification work that we do for measurement and M&V studies. It doesn't suggest that everybody does everything every year, but it does ask us to report. From that to that end, we are looking at nearly 4 dozen measurement and verification studies that will be complete by the end of 2010. Each of them will be publicly available. So in terms of the details surrounding what underlies each of those verification studies, we make them publicly available on the web link noted before, and utility representatives are more than happy to talk about those programs as well. The realization rates are generally in the 80 to 100% range, so for state policy purposes, that's important because we want to be realistic in terms of the targets that we set and the savings that we realize, and that will make your jobs easier in terms of what you could expect to see in other areas of state energy policy and how that fits in. One final comment, and then I will be done. Just in terms of the importance of trends, what you'll see here is there's never really a great apples-to-apples comparison in terms of how you look at any of these numbers. So the main thing that we'd like you to take away is the trend lines are important, not necessarily whether you're dealing with 10 megawatts versus 11 megawatts. It's the trends, and if you realize significant trend increases, then you can argue that you're doing a pretty good job. And certainly our report suggests that, and be happy to take questions.
You sound like the guy who manages my 401k.
We're not going down to a 201k on energy efficiency, though. So, thank you.
Next presentation, please. And I know it's been a long morning, and now we're into the early afternoon. So, if you can make an effort to not be redundant on what Mr. Tomaszewski said or what previous presenters have presented.
Thank you. My name is Tom Gackstetter. I'm the Director of Energy Efficiency at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity. DWP is the largest municipal utility in the nation. We serve about 1.4 million customers, and we sell last year 23,787 gigawatt hours of energy, gigawatt hour being 1 million kilowatt hours of energy. In program year 2008-2009, I'm proud to say that DWP set a new city record for energy efficiency savings. We set a record of 318 gigawatts, or 318 million kilowatt hours saved. That represents 1.3% of our total customer load, avoiding the emission of almost 179,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions from our generation plants, and equivalent to taking 53,000 homes off the grid for a year. Energy efficiency plays a crucial role in DWP's IRP plan, the Integrated Resources Plan, of course being at the top of the loading order for our supply portfolio. And I'd like to briefly describe for you what is working as far as energy efficiency programs in Los Angeles. And by the way, I did not bring any presentations today. If you would like some documentation on our programs, I'd be happy to provide that for you. We have a low-income refrigerator exchange program. This provides a free Energy Star refrigerator for eligible customers. The old unit is picked up and recycled, as was previously described. The program was launched in 2007, and to date, more than 52,000 refrigerators have been picked up, and new Energy Star refrigerators replaced those units. Similar to Edison's program, we have a small business direct install program. This targeting our smallest business customers in Los Angeles who typically have no energy manager and typically have a lack of access to capital to make energy efficiency improvements. The program offers free lighting upgrades up to $2,500 worth for those customers, including fluorescent lighting fixture upgrades, CFLs, LED exit signs. The program was launched in 2008, and more than 45,000 businesses have been served to date. We have embarked last year on a CFL distribution program. This is an effort not only to gain some immediate energy savings, but also to remind and introduce to our customers the availability of this energy-saving technology that is just a tremendous energy saver at a tremendously low cost. We delivered 2 CFLs to every resident in Los Angeles, 2.4 million bulbs in the course of about 2 months. Our commercial lighting efficiency offer is a rebate program, a lighting rebate program for our commercial customers. It's vendor-driven due to our high rebate levels, so we leverage their marketing forces and our program to generate tremendous participation in the programs. We offer rebates on over 130 measures that result in very short paybacks for customers who are upgrading their lighting within their facilities. Similarly, we have a refrigeration program, another rebate program that is also vendor-driven to the incentive levels. We offer incentives on 41 rebated measures, again offering very short paybacks for those kinds of things like seals on refrigerator doors, air curtains, etc. The basic message here is that turnkey services and a strong price signal really drive the market in energy efficiency. However, that being said, we are embarking on a new approach to energy efficiency, and I will tell you that David Freeman is leading the charge on this at DWP. He's our interim general manager presently. What this program will do is be a very proactive approach to energy efficiency and water conservation to every customer in Los Angeles. We'll provide a comprehensive energy efficiency and water conservation assessment to identify all opportunities within the business and within the home. Included with that will be an identification of DWP programs that match up to those opportunities, and that will include some new direct install services. Beyond that, we will be offering project financing as needed to customers, and that will include the AB 811 model as well as perhaps on-bill financing. We're looking at that as well, and a strong element in terms of customer education. Given the customer base that we have, this will be a sustained effort over 10 years and will be supported by significant increases in both staffing and budget in the realm of energy efficiency. Challenges we're facing, as most utilities are, developing and maintaining the program infrastructure to deliver these types of services, and continuing the growth in program momentum, customer participation, and strong vendor support, and then, of course, the impacts from the local economy detract from what we would otherwise be able to accomplish. Last thing I'd like to tell you is that we are initiating a new energy efficiency potential study that will help us set those goals that Scott mentioned, and we're in the process of finalizing our measurement and verification of our program achievements in the last 3 years. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. My name is Jim Parks. I work for the Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and we are the utility that supplies electricity to the state capitol. And I'm pleased to say that we have worked with staff at the Capitol on several occasions to try to improve the efficiency of the Capitol. And I did notice that even in this room, it looks like there is energy-efficient lighting. I was asked to talk about SMUD's energy efficiency programs, past, present, and future, and then to talk a little bit about legislation and what has worked and what hasn't. And I'm sure I can do that in about 3 minutes, so I will try to be aware of the time. SMUD's offered energy efficiency programs for 33 years. That's not anything big in and of itself, because I think most of the utilities in California have offered energy efficiency programs over that same period of time. Many of our programs have been award-winning, and we have been first out of the chute on many programs, and so we have had aggressive programs through the years, and it is part of our identity as a utility, and it is first in the loading order as a resource. A few of the other relevant things that SMUD has going for them. The board has adopted a core value of environmental protection. The board has also adopted a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 90% by 2050. We will achieve 23% renewables this year, and I think we may be one of the only major utilities in the state to achieve that goal. And we have an aggressive renewables goal to achieve 37% renewables by 2020. And we are on track to do that. We are also meeting our AB 2021 targets, and even though the targets are set at 1% per year for 10 years or 10% total, the SMUD board has adopted a target of 15% because we felt that just meeting the legislation was not a leadership role, but that was just what everyone should do. And so we adopted a more aggressive target, and we are on track to meet that goal. And we will continue to support energy efficiency. We have a portfolio of programs similar to the other utilities, so I don't need to go into a lot of detail there. We offer rebates for the normal lighting and air conditioning, refrigerator recycling, commissioning, and those types of programs. But looking to the future, some of the things that we are focused on that I find that are interesting, we have a pretty aggressive emerging technology program. And you asked earlier about what are the 5 top emerging technologies, and I think really in our service territory where we are constrained by the summer peak, we are focused on reducing that peak load, and so we're working on some air conditioner technologies that incorporate using evaporative condensing, it's called, where you use water on like residential air conditioners to spray on the condensing coil, and that reduces the peak demand significantly. We're having some success in that area. And then the other areas that I would highlight would be really LEDs, and I'd say that's probably the next top 2 or 3 because there's LED parking lights, there's LED street lighting, there's LED in refrigerated cases, there's LEDs as general illumination, and we're seeing progress in each one of those. In fact, I was at a meeting yesterday, and someone from Philips held up a light bulb, and they said, this one is about the same size as a 60-watt incandescent, but it provides the same light level for only 10 watts, so 1/6 the illumination, and the light lasts for 25,000 hours. We're also working in the area of deep energy efficiency retrofits, and we're receiving $20 million from the stimulus funds to help retrofit 15,000 homes in our service territory. We are working on net zero energy homes and buildings. There is a goal in California. It's not a mandate, but a goal to achieve net zero by 2020 on homes. And I think to the extent that that's cost effective, that's a goal that's a noble goal. It's not cost effective right now. It costs about $50,000 incremental cost to make a net zero home. But if electricity prices go up, price of technology comes down, it's a possibility. We're also working on smart grid efforts. I don't want to talk about that a whole lot other than to say through distribution automation, we expect to achieve 2% energy efficiency savings. With respect to legislation, I think we're like most people. We probably feel like the best legislation is no legislation. However, having said that, we get certain goals like AB 2021, 1% per year for 10 years. I like the high-level goal. Once you set the high-level goal, then give us the opportunity to achieve that goal. And I think when we start seeing supplemental legislation, it's like, well, now you'll do this, and you'll do this, and you'll do that, and we haven't had a chance to achieve the high-level goal, then we start, opposing certain pieces of legislation. Senate Bill 1, the solar bill, was another one where you just said 3,000 megawatts of photovoltaics throughout California. That's a goal we can understand. It's a goal we can work to achieve. AB 32, another one like that. You establish the high-level goals, and you allow the flexibility for the utilities to achieve those goals. And then one last point I just wanted to make was with respect to energy efficiency and spending, I don't think it's about spending. A lot of times people look at what's the percent of revenue you're spending on energy efficiency. I think it's effectiveness. So how are you spending your money? How effective are you on that? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Ettinson with NRDC. Thanks for the opportunity to speak again. It's been 4 years since California law made cost-effective energy efficiency the top priority resource for all utilities. So this is a great time to assess. What you're receiving right now is a summary PowerPoint and our 2009 report analysis. So this is not the report that recently came out today. We didn't have time to do our analysis this afternoon. However, we will be following up with the more updated data. So first, I want to commend NCPA for their leadership role. During all of these processes, we couldn't get as far as we have with the information without NCPA's collaboration, and we commend them for that and look forward to working more with them and the other agencies as well. Overall, the POUs have made great progress since SB 1037 became law 4 years ago, doubling reported energy savings since 2006 and providing customers an estimated savings, net savings of $400 million. However, as I noted in my earlier panel, there is still more potential to achieve. While we do agree that the trends are positive and we're encouraged by them, we also like to look at industry-wide metrics such as percent of revenues as well as percentage of sales. So how much energy efficiency savings as a percent of electricity sales. We agree that one without the other doesn't tell the whole story, so we like to look at both of them. Moving forward, we see that the publicly owned utilities have yet to reach the industry standard metric of 1%, an energy efficiency savings of 1% of sales. However, we're planning to do so this year, and we look forward to seeing the report that we're confident will have increased savings. To achieve such a sustained level of savings, however, we think that there needs to be a few more adjustments to the existing policies. For example, AB 2021 requires the POUs to treat energy efficiency investments as resource procurement investments. That means that they should be treated the same way they treat investments in power plants. While some of the utilities have done so, we think in aggregate there's more improvement to integrate energy efficiency into the POU resource planning. This is crucial to ensure that energy efficiency is used as a resource, and as you've heard earlier, energy efficiency is still the cheapest source of energy. In addition, we estimate that the POUs in aggregate need to increase investments significantly beyond 2009 projections, again based on last year's report. And noting that the CEC found itself that the current public benefits charge isn't enough to reach the targets or the potential savings that is available to them. Another recommendation is we would like to ensure that the targets are aggressive when they're being set. This is a year for target setting, and we urge the utilities to include specifics on how they went about their potential study and how they derive targets so that we can best analyze and work with them to ensure that they succeed. In addition, as noted before, we want to see actual savings. So in order to do so, we need to ensure that the evaluation is robust and comprehensive. And while we understand that the utilities have different sizes, demographics, we're very sensitive to that. These are still the general recommendations moving forward, and we think that and as per AB 2021, all utilities must have evaluation reports, this coming report, and we look forward to reading about those in the recently SB 1037 report. Lastly, if the utilities are truly going to achieve the efficiency that they see as a potential and to reach their targets, there will be also a potential to have economic hardships on recovering their fixed costs. And so similar to the utilities, breaking the link between those fixed cost recoveries and the volume of sales so that they are not undergoing financial hardship is something that we would like to look forward to in the future. Also looking ahead, we look forward to working together with the CEC and all the stakeholders to address the existing, real, or perceived barriers that are facing increased achievement of the potential, and to come up with actual solutions to reach those. We think we've started, have a great foundation for that work, and we think that moving forward we can do so effectively to achieve all the potential.
Thank you very much. Again, consistent themes I'm hearing from this panel, but let me take the opportunity that most ratepayers in LADWP territory don't have. That's to ask a question, since I'm a resident. LA Times recently reported that Mayor Villaraigosa's proposed an increase in the energy cost adjustment factor of 2.7 cents per kilowatt hour, 0.7 of that being dedicated to renewables and energy efficiency.
That's my understanding, yes.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
My understanding is that the mayor has asked for that change and that addition to provide more transparency about how energy efficiency is funded and where it is funded. Right now, it is energy efficiency is a component of our energy cost adjustment factor, along with fuel costs and other costs associated with running the utility. This funding that the mayor has proposed would be dedicated to energy efficiency and other things that have environmental benefit. And again, it is strictly for, as I understand it, transparency to the ratepayer to know what that dollar is for and where it is being used.
But this wouldn't be the exclusive source of funding for renewables or energy efficiency, right?
No, that's correct. It would add on to help us get to those goals that have been set for the city, 20% in 2010 and 40% in 2020.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Senator Cox knows a little something about SMUD.
Thank you.
Okay. Appreciate your patience and your presentation. So I want to thank you for that. And just to sort of sum up the first part of today's hearing, reiterating some of the themes that we heard repeatedly. One, the energy efficiency program success in the state, from energy saved to money saved to emissions saved, but also a theme and a commitment that we can and must do better. And I think that's what I take away from the hearing. Commitment to continue to strive to do better for the people that we represent. An additional theme of jobs, 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 the cost effectiveness of all of this from a dollar standpoint, from an emission standpoint, but from a job creation standpoint is not lost on me, and I believe all members of the committee. So we'll look to see that over the course of not just the next several years, but literally the next several months. And finally, for all these measurements and to determine what is successful and what's not, the value of metrics and quantifying that progress, quantifying that success. I was heartened to hear that being a priority for all parties that testified here today. So thank you again for your presentations and your time. We'll be seeing you again soon. Okay, thank you. And that, with that, we come to the second part of today's hearing. For those of you in the audience who have been patient all morning, I want to say thank you. For members of the committee and for those watching on a monitor, this is a part of the hearing that we've designated to discuss the ARA State Energy Program energy efficiency funding. As we've heard repeatedly during the course of the morning, California has historically led the way when it comes to energy programs, energy efficiency programs, but we can and must do better. And specifically, a lot of the federal stimulus dollars that are coming to California are intended to, yes, put people back to work, yes, try to stimulate the economy, but in a very practical way, sort of ramp up the existing program infrastructure that we have. Some of you should look at this hearing today as a follow-up to the JLAC hearing held earlier this year, just a few weeks ago, where we looked at the state energy program ARA funds and how quickly they were moving or not moving, how quickly they were being implemented or not being implemented, and specifically how quickly they were creating jobs or not creating jobs. Total ARA funds allocated for for state energy programs nationwide was to the tune of about $3.1 billion. California's share of that was about $226 million. And of that, the largest program of the Energy Commission's ARA program is the Energy Efficiency Program at about $110.3 million. And there's three programs that we've been focusing on. The first, the Municipal Financing Program, about $30.5 million. The second, the Municipal Commercial Building Targeted Measure Retrofit Program, about $29.6 million. And the California Comprehensive Residential Building Retrofit Program, about $50.2 million. So that adds up to the $110.3 million that we're referring to. The over the last several weeks, we know that the Commission has announced proposed awards for the $110 million on February 10th, I believe. And it's by now no secret to anybody, from the commissioners to the staff to the members of the legislature and to the general public, that I have some concerns about the proposed awards, with less than $5 million of those dollars being awarded to all Southern California applicants. Indeed, I was motivated to write a letter, which was actually co-signed by the chairman of the Assembly Utilities and Commerce Committee, to the Energy Commission, expressing grave concern about the inequitable distribution of these funds. We received a preliminary response from Chairman Douglas that, in my opinion, failed to explain how the Commission came to approve the guidelines that did not ensure that ARRA funds would be distributed equitably throughout the state. I believe ARRA funds are available for California, not just for one area of the state, but for all Californians. In that letter, that response letter, Chairman Douglas, I interpreted, offered a consolation prize of sorts, suggesting that $10.6 million from the block grant program could be directed to a, quote, specific geographic region. While that might have been tempting for some, I felt that even with that $10.6 million direction, it wouldn't offset the imbalance and inequity of the award program as a whole. Let me be abundantly clear. I'm not strictly trying to press for more money for my district nor for my city. I'm concerned about the geographic inequity from both a population basis for the entire state, and even more so from an unemployment basis from throughout the state. According to the Employment Development Department, of the 2.3 million workers or so who are currently unemployed in the state of California, nearly 1.3 million, that's about 58%, live in Southern California. The letter directed to the Energy Commission, I believe all members of the committee have a copy, outlined county by county throughout Southern California the number of unemployed. If Southern California's fair share were based on unemployment figures, Southern California should have received somewhere around 57% of the grant funding, instead of the less than 5% that is proposed. It puzzles me how the Commission could find it equitable to award application from the southern half of the state to only about 5% of the overall pot, with the 1.3 million people who are unemployed. People are hurting in all parts of the state, and the Recovery Act was intended to help them. Why wasn't it a priority to ensure that the funding was distributed equitably throughout the state? To make sure I wasn't off base, I went back and reread the language of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And let me quote the first line of the act, the very first line: making supplemental appropriations for job preservation and creation. We went a little bit further and looked at the ARRA site, recovery.gov, and it couldn't be clearer. It says ARRA is a direct response to the economic crisis. The Recovery Act has three immediate goals. Number one, create new jobs and save existing ones. Number two, spur economic activity and invest in long-term growth. And number three, this is where it begins to get real good, foster unprecedented levels of accountability and transparency in government spending. If this is the intent, it leads not just to one question, but two. The first, how is it that Southern California, home to 1.3 million of California's unemployed, is practically shut out of the grant program? But two, on the transparency side, what was the process that led to this result? So we look at the guidelines and begin to inquire as to how they were crafted for spending down these Recovery Act dollars. In Chairman Douglas's letter, responding to our initial letter, again, she states that stakeholder workshops were held to develop the State Energy Program guidelines. The Commission staff consistently heard input on the need for a transparent, competitive process. That's good. So it doesn't seem like the argument against the equitable distribution of funds started at the Energy Commission. This is where you can breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. But we looked a little bit deeper. We looked through the public comment records and found that the Sacramento Municipal Utility District submitted a letter during that process that actually did argue against geographic equity. In the first paragraph of their letter, let me quote, they write that while it may be desirable to spread the grant funds equitably throughout the state, setting maximum funding limits on geographic regions will restrict the Commission's ability to award funds. They go on to write that the Energy Commission needs flexibility to allocate the funds to applicants who can demonstrate a track record. Applicants who can demonstrate a track record for fast and high-quality implementation and provide evidence that they can meet the requirements in each program area. We recommend placing greater weight on these criteria than on geographic equity. So the Commission had a choice to make. They had options. They could have established guidelines that would have resulted in a transparent, competitive process that would have resulted in the equitable distribution of economic stimulus dollars. Instead, they apparently took the advice of SMUD and rejected the option of making equitable allocations geographically. The way I see it, this resulted in a windfall for Sacramento. SMUD won the largest grant, nearly $20 million. Sacramento County won the third largest grant, another $16.5 million. Nearly 40% of the $110 million in our money went to a county that's home to about 4% of the state's population and about 5% of the state's unemployed. And while I'm sure SMUD and Sacramento County have very worthwhile applications, I don't knock them for that. I'm sure they have the experience, and I know there's some need here in Sacramento. I wonder about the process that produced such skewed results. Chairman Douglas, thank you for being here. Would you please respond to some of these questions and concerns?
Thank you, Senator Padilla. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. And without wanting to distract it all from the matter of hand, I wanted to take the opportunity to also thank you for your leadership on SB 8X34. It was an important bill for the Energy Commission, and it's something that was something that I also appreciated deeply.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think it's a good counterexample that I want to make sure to emphasize today. When it comes to the siting division and the tremendous work and load that we're putting on them, all go to the wall and fight for resources, fight for tools to make these programs successful. But I will work with equal fervor on areas of the Energy Commission's work that I feel isn't functioning the way it should be.
Well, I appreciate that. And you actually started this this hearing right where I want to start it, which is with the question or the issue of discretion and trade-offs and balancing what we're trying to achieve with the ARRA funding. And actually, I was here a year ago testifying before this committee and the Assembly Utilities and Commerce Committee. And I presented then this is page 1 in your handout, a list of guiding principles or goals for the Stimulus Act and for Energy Commission implementation. Much of this is taken straight out of the Stimulus Act. Some of it is derived from state law and policy. You'll see we made retaining and creating jobs and promoting the recovery number 1. We have efficiency, accountability, minimum administrative burden, leverage, which increases benefits, contributing to our energy and policy goals, improving our economic efficiency, supporting competitive solicitations. These are some of the goals that we set out for ourselves in administering these programs. And as you pointed out...
Part of the interruption here, but I recall that hearing and that discussion. The couple of takeaways I recall were a commitment to work with the legislature, regardless of the Commission's effort, regardless of what the administration said, regardless of this FEST program that had been established, and I believe we've fallen far short of that. I also recall not being the only member of the committee at the time that asked how the programs and awards would reflect where the unemployment was, where the economic hardship was in the state of California. So with that, please continue.
Okay, and I'll definitely get to those issues. So as you pointed out, there are potential conflicts between these different goals, and the Energy Commission has had to mediate these conflicts and exercise discretion in how we deal with them. And I'll give you a couple examples. We have to move quickly. We have tough deadlines in the Federal Stimulus Act. We're under pressure, and we have taken it upon ourselves to not only meet those deadlines, but beat those deadlines. That can conflict at times, or that has to be balanced, I should say, with the need to meet federal and state accountability and process requirements. So I'll tell you now, while we have shaved time off of our processes where we can, at no time did we compromise our ability to meet state and federal legal requirements. And so that's one thing where we have heard people beating the drum to move faster. We've moved as fast as we can, but we've dotted I's and crossed T's and done what we need to do.
Maybe have dotted T's from the way I look at it. Look, let me try to cut to the chase a little bit more here. Maybe it was Freudian, maybe it wasn't. How you said sometimes these policies are in conflict. You restated it by saying, we have a tough balancing act here with multiple goals. It's something I've thought a lot about in preparation for today's hearing. So cutting to the chase here, the way the programs were structured and the way the criteria for the grants have been structured just leads me to think, well, who is it that's thinking this through and putting this together? And I don't know if members of the committee have paid as close attention as the committee staff and my staff have on who specifically is involved with the crafting of the guidelines and the sort of public input process for it. And I ask because it's clearly Energy Commission staff that's doing a lot of the legwork here. And it's natural to sometimes wonder, are there any external forces involved in how these guidelines were created? Members of the committee, it turns out that one of the commission staff who authored the guidelines, Bill Pennington, serves on a nonprofit board. Nothing wrong with that, it would seem, but he serves on a nonprofit board with 3 of the applicants who were awarded grants. Should raise a red flag. I know it does for me. Again, Mr. Pennington of the California Energy Commission was one of the authors of the guidelines. So you have an energy staff member authoring grant guidelines while serving on a board with the very firms that are applying for those dollars. And it just so happens that those applicants together won a significant chunk of the money, more than $43 million. Does that seem right? If our staff was involved with something like that, you better believe people would be asking questions. The nonprofit in question is the California Commissioning Collaborative. So we did a little bit of homework. The primary focus of the collaborative is developing efficiency standards for auditing buildings, like we heard in the first part of today's hearing, and promoting the idea of making buildings more efficient. On the surface, this seems fine. It just so happens that the energy efficiency programs, in question also focused on auditing and retrofitting of buildings to make them more efficient. On the surface, that seems fine too. But we had our staff look a little bit deeper into the collaborative and found that the person listed on the website as the executive director, Phil Welker, is also the executive director of one of your grantees, Portland Energy Conservation, Inc. In fact, Portland Energy Conservation, Inc. was the second biggest winner of these ARA funds. And they're not even based in California. They're based in Portland, and they won $18.8 million. I already talked about the first and the third largest recipients. So this is the second. Not only do the collaborative and your grantee have the same executive director, but they also have the same Portland address, and that can be verified on the Attorney General's website. So one of the questions I have to ask is, are these 2 separate entities or one entity with 2 branches? There's an uncomfortable level of overlap going on here. And by the way, why would the California Commissioning Collaborative be based in Oregon? Common sense question to me. On Portland Energy Conservation's website, it says that they want to expand their presence into California. Well, what better way to establish a presence in California than to head up a California nonprofit that includes on its board top Energy Commission staffers who write the grant program guidelines? I hope you're getting as uncomfortable as I've been when we uncovered this. It appears that if Portland Energy is running a nonprofit that is loaded with clients, in fact, 7 of the 9 organizations represented on the board are clients of Portland Energy. Portland Energy even lists the collaborative as a client on its website. So how does that work? They're awarding themselves contracts? Like SMUD's opposition to the geographic equity argument, it appears Portland Energy strategy has paid off big time. While based in Portland, in Oregon, they're scheduled to receive 4 times as much funding as California's largest city, the city of Los Angeles. And while the scope of their projects and their work may sound noble and may indeed result in energy savings, so do the applications of others submitted to the Commission. But amazingly, a large number and percentage of the other applicants were disqualified. How's that possible? I don't think we're referring to people that have just recently come together with no expertise. We're talking about entities like the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California. We're talking about the cities of San Diego, Long Beach, Los Angeles, Irvine, Orange, on and on and on. Clearly people with track records of getting work done over the years. An unbelievable 89% of applicants were disqualified for failing to meet the minimum score. That seems like an extremely high failure rate. But maybe that's pretty typical. Chairman Douglas, would you care to answer these questions?
I'm beginning to wonder if I'm going to get a word in edgewise, but I'll try. I'm starting broad. We will go into the 110 program. So some of the ways that we're complying with the accountability and process requirements include developing a data collection and reporting system, incorporating federal pass-down provisions in funding agreements so that funding recipients comply, pursuing contracts to assist with auditing services, program support, and monitoring, verification, and evaluation, and hiring an internal auditor in December of 2009. So that is moving ahead expeditiously with the rollout of programs. Public outreach and process, which you obviously mentioned. Some public process is required by law. It's fair to say, I think, that the Energy Commission's gone above and beyond the minimum required by law. We've had over 40 public workshops. To save time within our schedule, we've done some concurrently, as much as 3 at once in different parts of the state. We've been to L.A., we've been to the Bay Area, but we've also been to El Centro, Chula Vista, Monterey, Clovis, Redding, Ripon, and more.
Chairman Douglas, from my comments, I think it's clear that it wasn't the public process that concerns me. I think you did comply and probably went above and beyond. My concern is, was there any private input that might not have been appropriate that was at play here?
I understand. And we will go there, and I should introduce the people at the table with me. Bill Pennington is here. He can speak to his role on this board and also his role with the guidelines. My advisor, Panama Bartholomew, to my right, and then to my left is David Meraki. He's the director of the California Conservation Corps. He's here to talk about the benefits to California of the one project that you've particularly raised so far in your comments. So we're absolutely here to be responsive, and at the same time, I think it's important to set the context so that we have a broader discussion and we don't focus too narrowly too soon. As we talked about public process, I'm going to pause again on public process. It's critical to us that the process be seen as fair, reasoned, transparent, and accountable.
I couldn't agree more.
It makes the programs better. It reduces challenges. It reduces headache on the back end. And so we had about 100 applications for the SEP money. We were able to award 12 before we ran out of money. We have a lot of disappointed people in the state asking for debriefings, wondering how they scored. Now, we post all of this. We post the applications. We debrief with unsuccessful applicants. We've had a number of those meetings. No doubt we'll have more. And it seems from the outcome of those meetings that unsuccessful applicants walk away still disappointed, but certainly understanding what it was in terms of scoring that they could have done better. Mr. Pennington can speak to that as well.
I feel compelled to interject yet again. And I know it's frustrating you, but believe me, it doesn't match my frustration this morning. You talk about more than 100 applications and having run out of money after only a dozen or so awards. And I'm wondering if the folks that didn't make the cut propose to spend the money any worse or any better than the programs that you have chosen to award. Let me talk a little bit about the awards, because we had a chance to look at the background materials. Somehow the Commission approved the Portland Energy proposal that budgets $18,000 to buy Apple iPhones and another $250,000 to pay those cell phone bills. I don't think that's going to go over very well with taxpayers if we want to talk about transparency and accountability. I'm sure you have a response to that, but let me read from the proposal. Quote, the program will be substantially managed from Portland, Oregon, where labor costs are less than in California. That's in the proposal that was submitted to you. And I don't think that's in keeping with the spirit and intent of the Recovery Act, and certainly not from a California policy standpoint. This is in a proposal that includes that salaries for some of the staffers will exceed $20,000 a month. $20,000 a month for the next 2.5 years. One staff position alone is budgeted to pay as much as $721,000 over the next 32 months. Another could earn $663,000 according to the salary schedule that was submitted as part of the proposal. I thought we were trying to create jobs in California, not millionaires in Oregon. The Energy Commission spokesman, Sandy Cooney, was quoted in an LA Times article today saying that the staff hourly pay rates in the Portland Energy Conservation proposal included administration costs such as fringe benefits and overhead. Maybe that's why the numbers are so high. But in the proposal itself, if you look at Exhibit B in their proposal, the text at the bottom of the page could not be clearer. It reads, quote, as a reminder, these sheets list unloaded, that is before fringe benefits or any other overhead rates are included. So is the document right, or is the spokesperson right? Perhaps the most bothersome is that the Portland Energy proposal seeks to use your labor, Conservation Corps folks in California. Are they getting these $20,000 a month wages? Is that what you're here to testify, that that's the benefit to California?
Senator.
And let me add one more question to that list. Are ARA-funded projects, these ARA-funded projects, or are they not required to pay prevailing wage, not minimum wage?
Senator, it sounds to me like we won't get a word in edgewise until we talk about this specific program, we'll do it.
You get your word in when you start responding to the specific questions I'm asking you.
So the Energy Smart Jobs program is a really innovative, really interesting program that will benefit Californians in diverse parts of the state. It uses the Conservation Corps, and so we've got the director of the Conservation Corps here to speak directly to the program. But I just want to say a few things about PECI and why it's especially qualified to administer this program. You've painted it as an Oregon company. It is an Oregon company, but it's an Oregon company that does a significant amount of work in California. PECI has delivered energy efficiency programs in California since 2002, working with all of the investor-owned utilities and many of the publicly owned utilities, developing programs and implementing programs that have saved California businesses over 180 gigawatt hours per year. PECI has implemented PG&E's Energy Smart Grocer program for the last 4 years, exceeding PG&E's energy savings targets. It worked with SDG&E's Trade Ally program for the last 4 years to deliver refrigeration market mobilization services to achieve energy savings in smaller, hard-to-reach markets, such as the ones that this program targets. PECI is currently working with Silicon Valley Power to implement refrigeration-related retrofits in commercial businesses. The proposed program has SMUD as a committed partner and will also partner with other interested California utilities when the program begins. PECI has worked with literally thousands of California commercial businesses to reduce energy costs and has thoroughly examined California's commercial refrigeration market, which is, again, what this proposal targets. The proposed program will target 30,000 businesses across the state to reach the goal of saving an additional 88 gigawatt hours per year. It's a tremendous savings. It's well ahead of the savings per dollar target established by the Department of Energy. And I want to make the point that while California is a center of so much innovation and so much leadership in this area, we don't have all of the expertise and innovation. And it is a benefit to California to bring in a firm with extremely specialized expertise and a track record and experience in California to deliver services and do capacity building in parts of California that can use it and can build off of it. And I also want to make the point that if we set a precedent of saying we don't want outside expertise, we need, if the idea wasn't thought of in California, it shouldn't be implemented in California. We do a tremendous disservice to companies up and down California who are innovating, who are developing programs that can be models for other states and models for the nation. So I want to ask you to think about the impact of reading too much into the fact that one of the 12 programs that won has an Oregon administrator. And with that, I'd like to ask. Now
that you've gotten a word in edgewise, let me add. I hear you're going to bat for Portland Energy Company. I get that, and the arguments that you're suggesting. And while they may have been an integral part of previous programs, previous grants, their partnerships with utilities that you laid out, and they have a track record to show for it, fine. We're talking about these programs, these funds that I believe were intended to create jobs and stimulate the economy in California, not export some of our stimulus dollars to Portland. The work would be done here. I know you're going to counter with, but the work's going to be done here. It's done throughout the state. We're going to use the Conservation Corps as the backbone here, but a minimum wage or near minimum wage person being paid for work here while execs in Portland earn $20,000 a month. I don't think that's the spirit and intent of these funds and these programs. I have another couple of questions. Just because you bring up their history in the state, if they've had the presence in the state, if they've had the track record and the success in the state, why is it then that in their proposal they propose to establish a San Francisco office and a presence in the state of California? So I'm not, again, sure of what to believe, what they write in their proposal or how they publicly respond in the LA Times article. So I think there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And when I hear that so many other applications were rejected, it makes me just wonder even more. They may have unique experience and a unique expertise, but I think we're hard-pressed when it comes to stimulus dollars intended for California jobs and the California economy to say that the 89 applicants that didn't make the cut, all of them fall way far short of what a Portland entity would bring to this specific effort. So I have some additional questions that I want to ask of you and actually table this discussion to our next committee hearing. I'd like to request a matrix outlining all the applications and how they were rated, including number of jobs to be created, wage rates, benefits, training, type of work, square footage to be covered, etc. I saw on your website that in some instances you actually post the score cards for the applicants. You referenced that in some of the other programs. But when it came to the energy programs in question here, the information was not posted. So I'm going to close today by saying this. until clarification is brought about, I don't think this process is passing the smell test. I've already heard this morning from folks who believe that the only way to have been able to compete for a CEC contract is to know some of the people at the CEC, that it's an insider's game. The cozy relationship that some people could interpret, I'm certainly looking at interpreting from the information I've shared today, would suggest that maybe these concerns are valid. I'll be referring this information to appropriate offices for further review as we strive for this transparency and accountability with California's stimulus dollars. So I'll ask that the Energy Commission be prepared to come back before this committee at our next hearing with the information that we're requesting today, along with, number one, alternatives to addressing the geographic inequity problems that we have raised, and two, ways to improve upon the process to provide the true transparency and accountability required in the Recovery Act and demanded by the people of California.
Can I make a few more comments? We will come back as you've requested and provide this information. Just a few more comments. The competitive program that you focus this hearing on is one of a number of programs. When you actually, over 60% of the money we administered, or that we administered, or that came out by DOE, the other block grant money, went out by formula. And so the per capita distribution statewide is fairly even. We've given you some money on that. It's not complete, or some information on that. It's not completely even. I see Senator Dutton flipping through some of these documents right now. So there's some detailed information in there already that you have at your disposal. I want to say that I strongly object to the characterization of our process as unfair or biased or an insider game. So we could ask some folks to speak now, but we can also come in. We have been scrupulous every step of the way. We had our attorneys look and look again, and there are no issues. This is not in any way the sort of situation that you're afraid it is. So
we'll provide us documentation in anticipation of the next hearing.
We'll provide you
prove otherwise. And let me just close today's hearing by, since you mentioned this is just one program of several programs, the three programs that add up to the $110 million. Municipal Financing Program, $30.5 million. Southern California applicants received about 15%. The Municipal and Commercial Building Targeted Measure Retrofit Program, $29.6 million pot. Nothing went to Southern California. The California Comprehensive Residential Building Retrofit Program, a $50.2 million pot. Again, Southern California received none of these funds. So when you say that on a whole there's a more equitable look at it,
Senator, those are the subsets of the 110. So what I'm saying is, when you also look at the clean energy workforce money, the ECA money, and the block grant money, all together with the statewide programs in the SEP, which we have not attributed to specific cities or counties because it's very hard to do that, and with the collaboratives on the block grant side, the distribution is quite equitable. There are gaps, and in particular what we see and what I identified in the letter in my response to you is a programmatic gap, because we do want to make sure that there are comprehensive regional retrofit programs up and running in the state. And that's where, when we were looking at some portion of the $10.6 million, what we are looking at is, given the awards that in the SEP 110, which we are proud of and which we think really did the job of putting forward the projects that will create the most jobs and have the potential to deliver the most benefits and duration. And one of the differences really between the proposals that got funded and the ones that didn't was how specific and explicit they were able to be about how they would actually achieve the goals in the proposal.
And I just want you to be as explicit and direct as you can at the next hearing with how we get a better distribution of these funds that reflect where the unemployed are in the state of California. With that being said, we'll see you at the next hearing, and this meeting will almost be adjourned. We'll leave it open to public comment, which I would imagine is going to be geared more towards the first part of today's hearing. Thank you, Chairman. So would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Bram Siegel, Power Correction Systems. We're a business partner with the Department of Energy Rebuild America program. I've been trying to track some of the block grants. I'm looking at eecbg.energy.gov. I've noticed that some of the tribes in San Diego County, which have populations of 350 people, have received block grants in the range of as high as $10 to $20 million. With very small populations. So I'm also wondering how that happens. I also understand that there's been, Department of Energy has had block grants given directly to certain tribes and cities, and then indirectly through local energy commissions in different states for smaller tribes and cities. And I'm also, so the question, just to be an issue here, is does anyone know what portion of those block grants goes to the energy conservation policy, which seems to be a grant of money up front, and what portion of that block grant goes to the bond, which is under AB 811? Does anyone know those questions, the answers?
Okay. I don't think we have that information today, but we'll strive to do that for the next hearing as well.
And another topic is that I'm interested in, we've spent the last 15 years trying to introduce new and starting up technologies for energy conservation. We had a real hard time getting acceptance. For example, about 2 years ago, I published a report for PUC and EPRI and CEC, which still has yet to be published. It's recognized by the Department of Energy, Oak Ridge Lab. It's a conservation measure that can reduce electrical distribution losses between 2 to 5% on each transformer and the grid. It'll increase system capacity, system reliability, reduce maintenance costs. We have yet to have any cooperation. Mike Gravely from the CEC, who's working on the energy storage program, is trying to get answers. We can't get any answers. So I think that's a very important issue also. So I'd like to one point try to propose at whatever formality.
Can you put this in the form of a letter to me so we can follow up with you?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. My name is Audrey Chang. I'm the Executive Director of the California Energy Efficiency Industry Council. We are an industry trade group representing non-utility companies that support the efficient use of energy in California and throughout the world. And I just had a few quick comments. One, to mention that we do support Senator Padilla's comments earlier that efficiency really is the biggest bang for the buck in California. We've learned that over the past experience over the 35 years here in California, and it makes sense. It's good for the economy and it's good for jobs in California. From the business perspective, the most important factor to ensure that we reap all the benefits of energy efficiency is a strong and consistent efficiency policy environment. And that's absolutely imperative to drive job creation and fuel the businesses that help consumers and businesses within California save money and help us meet our energy and climate goals here in California. It's just a caution that if the policies in whatever way start or stop or ebb and flow, that really does create an uncertain business environment for a lot of my member companies to operate in, and they don't have that long-term certainty to be able to hire those jobs in California. Just an example, just due to the resurgence of efficiency over the past few years in California, there's stories of some of my member companies that have grown in employees and the number of employees by threefold just in the last few years. I don't know the specifics. PECI is a member company of the Efficiency Council. I don't know the specifics of your concern, but I think it is a good example of a company or organization that is drawn to do business here in California because of the strong efficiency policies here in the state. So just to summarize, we need those strong efficiency policies both on the IOU side for the POUs and statewide, so including strong codes and standards for efficient buildings and appliances. And we look forward to working together to maintain California's leadership, and the Efficiencies Council stands ready to help in whatever way we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you have specific suggestions on how to improve upon the policies of the energy efficiency programs, we certainly welcome that as well. Okay, thank you very much. You owe me a letter. One last comment.
I was involved with the best practices guides for schools nationwide on 6 different climate zones. And I think that kind of strategy could work well. We could group by climate zone in California and by type of building, whether what its use of the building and how old the building is. and standardize into a certain best practices guide for certain categories of buildings instead of spending huge amounts of money doing audits over and over in the same kind of situation. I'll put that in my recommendation.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. If there's no further public comment, this meeting is adjourned.